First of all, I want to start out and thank the committee members for attending the tour and thank the Diversion Authority for the tour. I know it was a lot of bus riding, but we got to see a lot of pretty impressive projects within one large project. And I also want to thank the Diversion Authority for providing lunch at noon today so we could get right back to work. So we're going to get right into the agenda, and we're going to start out with the 12:30 item, which is Chris is going to run through some slides, some timeline, I think. And you're going to show us a movie?
We'll be quick at that. Coordinated to work today, so.
If it can work and we can hear it, we'll watch a movie. Otherwise, we'll go to the slides.
Thanks, Senator Sarvag, Water Topics Committee. I know we just got done touring most of the project, but Ron thought I should maybe wrap up with just a little bit of an overview of kind of the overall project and what's going on. We did have a video queued up, and we're having some technical difficulties getting that to play. However, those are available on the DA's website, so if you wanted to watch, we do those monthly. It's a 2, 3, 4 minute drone video update that kind of gives a highlight of some of the construction that happened the last month. So if you want to watch those, they're all available on our website. And we update those typically the week of our board meeting, so the very end of the month, they should be updated and ready to go. So I want to talk a little bit just about the two main components. We're going to talk about three things today: the two main components, the diversion channel and the southern embankment, and then I'll talk just briefly about some of the mitigation projects we have ongoing. Now, as we toured today, the diversion channel itself is about 30 miles. We got to see probably the middle third of it today, and then a little bit on the upstream end down by the Cheyenne River. But as we talked in the bus, we've got 19 structures. They're all underway. We've got, I believe, work started on most of the drainage inlets, and then work is started on both or all three of the major structures. The diversion outlet is completed. I'll show you a picture of that here on an upcoming slide. And as we saw at the Maple River Aqueduct, they've got quite a bit of work done there on the main aqueduct flume, with certainly a lot of work to go, and then they're just getting started on the Cheyenne side. So here's a quick photo. The diversion channel was connected to the Red River late last fall. It has a rock arch rapids fish passage structure that's built into that allows fish to migrate out of the Red River and up into our channel, or from our channel back down into the river. Again, so that water is free flowing at the outlet as of today. Just a real quick overview of the kind of the main components of the channel. We talked through some of this on the tour today, but as you can see, kind of running down the middle of the channel, the squiggly line, we have a low flow channel that has that meander-ish look to it up to the point where we tie in with the Rush River. As we talked about on the bus, the Cheyenne and Maple Rivers are connected across to keep that connectivity and flow of water into the protected area and through the city of West Fargo. The Rush and the lower Rush Rivers were allowed to drop directly into the diversion channel. So based on that, we did create some additional enhancements to the low flow channel to allow that, again, that fish migration and habitat to establish in the main channel. Then the main channel extends, most of the green that you see on the map is the main channel itself. The levee that you see is on the right side of the screen. That's embedded partially into our extra material piles. And then you see the extra material from the channel is just stockpiled on the edges. The blue you see on the outside are the tow drains we talked about. That's an exterior drainage system that runs parallel with the channel on the outside of the EMBs to collect and distribute local water either into the channel if you're on the unprotected side, or into the local drainage systems or the rivers if you're on the protected side. So again, we saw this, the picture here is from back in June. So this gives you an idea from June to August how much work's been done. At this point now, pretty much all of the box culverts that carry water through the channel are completed, and they're working on the flume structure. Haven't poured any of the walls yet, but again, making great progress on the main part of the Maple River Aqueduct. So here's kind of a schematic of how those aqueducts will look. This is pretty much the angle we were standing at today. We were standing pretty much at the end of the wing wall that's on the bottom of the screen. So again, you'll see that the main structure The bridge structure, the U-shaped channel, will carry the water of the Maple or Cheyenne River across the aqueduct, and then those culverts or tubes, box culverts, will carry the water from the channel, cross it underneath the actual invert of the river channel during a flood event. The walls of the aqueduct flume are built tall enough that they will not have water from the diversion channel mixing into them at any point during our operation. So again, we talked about bridges. We stopped at one today, but again, our bridge progress has been really well. It was enhanced quite extensively with our nice mild winter last winter, but we've got bridges. The top left picture is one of the deck pours on the county road, I believe 431 bridge. Then you see we've got bridges in all states of construction, from preload in the bottom right up through just foundations and piling and substructures, to where we've got girders set on quite a few, and then they're working on forming decks. Anticipate we'll have several roads probably open by later this fall, with the majority of them opening up next year through next summer and fall. Again, lots of work going on also on the railroads. As I mentioned on the bus, we've got all of the railroad bypasses open and operational now. That was a big milestone. Lots of great coordination with the Burlington Northern Railroad to get those up and running and operational. Again, the BNSF Prosper line, the bottom right picture, that bridge is the furthest along. That one started a little bit earlier than the other, so they've got substructures done and are working on towards setting beams. Again, on the I-29 crossing, they also have beams set on one of the two bridges there. So making great progress on the structures as we highlighted during the tour. Quick walk through the southern embankment. Again, Terry did a good job outlining this. Again, we've got about 22 miles of earthen embankment that are being built. Again, that primary function is to stop the overland water and to create a storage pool for us to protect water from getting into the metro area, and also to direct water over to our diversion channel. There are three big structures. We stopped at two of them today, the diversion inlet and the Red River structure. Are well underway and nearing completion on the diversion and wild rice. And then, of course, we had some work on I-29 and several township road crossings and the grade raise as well. So again, the diversion inlet, this is where we were today. This, as Captain Volk mentioned, is virtually complete. We're just waiting on some final gate equipment that will finalize that project. So this project will essentially sit idle now until we would need to use it during an operational event in the future. Again, the wild rice, we weren't able to stop there today. They're working on finalizing access into that site, so it's a little bit dicey, but we do have that reconnected to the wild rice river through the structure. So again, this structure is nearing completion. They're working on kind of the final safety rails and stairs and those kind of things for access to the site. And anticipate probably the early to middle of next year we'll be transitioning that to the authority as well. But again, that structure will sit as it looks today, just the gates open, water flowing under the structure like a natural river until we would need to operate and actually use the gates for an operational event. Again, the red, this picture is pretty indicative of what we saw today. There may have been just a slight amount of work, but this was from just last month. Again, great progress being made on there. We're a little past halfway done on the Red River structure itself. Then southern embankment, I think we briefly touched about this, but all of the reaches for the southern embankment will be under contract by the end of this year, early next year. There's two stretches that the Corps is still designing and finalizing plans on. Those will be bid here later this fall. But we have several. Reach 1A is completely done. Reach 1B is underway. 2A and 2B are both under construction. They are planning to have a pre-construction meeting, I believe, this week or next week for Reach 4. That's the first stretch on the Minnesota side. That will start this fall and then be completed by next fall. So again, we talked a little bit, the I-29 grade raise. We raised about 4 miles of I-29 to elevate it, and then also built our southern embankment across the interstate system. Again, that raise was so that the interstate would stay open during our operational events in the future. What you see in the picture here are the borrow ditch bridges. Those are the channels on the on the pool side of the embankment that will carry water between the red, the wild rice, and the diversion inlet structure sites. So a little bit about the mitigation that we've undergone. This shows kind of a listing of the major mitigation projects that we have either underway or completed. Just going to highlight a couple of those today. We did complete a wetland mitigation project at the old Oxbow City site. We took an oxbow that had been developed around and restored that, reconnected it to the river, and created a wetland complex there, along with some extra planting of trees to reforest part of the tree removal we had to do for the project. And one other project that's a little bit unique for us, a little bit away from the Fargo-Moorhead area, but the Drayton Dam was the last remaining low-head dam on the Red River system between the start of the river in southern North Dakota all the way to Canada. So this was the last remaining low-head dam. As part of our mitigation for this project, the Corps of Engineers replaced that with a rock arch structure that was opened and functional last year. We're having a ribbon cutting ceremony here later this month to officially kind of set this project in motion and show it completed. But we've seen good results so far as the connectivity of the fisheries already since that project has been put in operation. And then finally, just to get quick update on the property acquisition side, we've got 97% of our construction footprint land acquired. The last remaining sites are just some finalization of some of the hearing process in Minnesota to finish off some of the land valuation side of things. And then we also are a little over half done acquiring the flowage easements in the upstream storage area. With that, again, there's lots of ways to stay connected with us. Again, our diversion website has a lot of the information that we talked about today, along with our drone updates, and regular updates go through several of our social media channels. So you can stay connected with us that way as well. And with that, I'd stand for any questions you guys might have again, or can turn it over to Tony to continue the presentation.
Is there any questions for Chris? I want to thank you. You were pretty thorough. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Magrum.
Thank you, Chairman. So 2 questions, actually. How many people did you have, or landowners did you have to use eminent domain on?
We're not completely done with our acquisition process, so I don't know the finalization of that. I know we were able to acquire the entire diversion channel footprint without using any eminent domain. We do have a few cases that are underway on the Minnesota side, but I don't know the exact number of landowners or parcels off the top of my head. But there were a few, but a select few that we've been able to negotiate with the vast majority of the landowners on the project so far.
Okay, thanks. And then the other question is, what's the percentage of water that you hold back so you don't flood the people up north when they, I mean, I'm sure you guys got that figured out that you'll open it very slow, right?
For sure. So as we get into our operational events, one of the primary functions of the storage area is to allow us the time to set that timing. That will vary depending on the event as far as, the percentage and time, but generally speaking, we will wait a day or two from the time we lower the gates and start controlling the water going into the metro area until we would start to open the gates on the diversion inlet structure. And again, through our modeling, we've been able to time that for, depending on the inflows, all of the different inflows will set the timing for how much we would release through the diversion structure. So there isn't a set percentage that we have, but it's generally just we're pausing and storing some water for a day or two, depending on the magnitude of the event, until we start sending water through the channel to the north.
One more question, Chairman. So is there always going to be a certain level of water in this drainage, or does it, because I'm just wondering, because is it going to be like a slough eventually where it's full of cattails?
Sure.
Or are there going to be fish in there? Can people fish there and stuff? Or?
I think the general answer, there will likely most of the time be some water in the diversion channel. Again, we have the 14 drain inlets that are intercepting water that normally was flowing towards the Maple, Cheyenne, Red Rivers. that we're intercepting and letting drop into the channel. So local rain drainage will continue to drain through the drains and then drop into the diversion channel. We don't anticipate under that normal type of rain that the water would stay within our low flow channel. So it would be pretty limited to where we would have water continually. It really would take an operational event to spill water out of that low flow channel and up onto the banks. So there will be some water flowing through the channel. As far as how connected it'll be and whether fish will like to be in there, I guess time will tell, but certainly they'll have the ability to be in there through the connections to the Red River.
Thank you.
You bet.
Is there any other questions for Chris? If not, thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Thanks, Senator Storvig.
And we'll have Commissioner Grinberg come up, and I'm just gonna, he was asked to come up and address a little bit. There's been a lot of news lately about, or a few months ago, about some things with rebar and changes, and so I had asked that they'd come forward and just kind of give us an explanation a little bit. I know there's legal issues, but please inform us of what you can.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. First, I'd like to give special thanks to Chris and his leadership and his expertise. We're lucky to have him on the diversion project. You may have met Cass County Commissioner Robert Wilson this morning, who is acting as one of the two co-executive directors. Robert's in the back of the room, as well as City Administrator Michael Redlinger is here acting in capacity as co-executive director as well as Mayor Shelley Carlson from Moorhead, Mayor Bernie Dardis from West Fargo, and Commissioner Denise Kolpak, who are members of the Diversion Authority. I can share with you that we are laser focused on protecting the interests of the taxpayers on this project as we go forward, and we've had a lot of tremendous success, and as you witnessed today in the tour, a lot of positive things are moving forward and we're making progress. Over lunch, I heard that Representative Swantek's 49th wedding anniversary this year. Caused me to reflect. It was 49 years ago I started to fight my first flood as a kid in Maple River in Mapleton, North Dakota. My father was the mayor, and I learned at the dinner table the tough decisions of elected officials have to make with water issues, and nothing that's not new to you as this committee and as a former member of this committee when I was in the legislature. So it's important to recognize the valuable work that you do. Fast forward through my time as a kid, keeping the gas in the pumps to pump water, to sandbagging in 1997 with CNN in my backyard when the decision by Mayor Furness at the time was to block off the city to prevent overland flooding from losing the city to a flood in 1997. We know what happened in Grand Forks that same year. Fast forward to 2009 when the federal officials were urging the city of Fargo to evacuate over a massive flood from the south. Mayor Wallaker at the time said we were going to fight. And I believe the number was 7 million sandbags in a few days to protect the city. Fast forward into 2013 session that the legislature committed the first commitment to the project with state funds. It's been a journey, and we're now well past that 50% mark in the journey for permanent flood protection here in Fargo and in the region, Fargo-Moorhead region. It matters, and your thoughtfulness, your consideration matters as well. I know what it's like to sit in a chair to make decisions when it affects water. So I appreciate your time and attention, and Senator Storvig, your commitment to bringing the committee here. I'm going to run through a few slides quickly. As Senator Storvig did mention, this received a favorable amount of attention this spring on the whole issue of epoxy-coated rebar. This before you is an example of, or a section, if you will, of the contract, the request for proposals, when the Diversion Authority went through the process of selecting a developer. This was a language that was inserted into the contract and the RFP that epoxy-coated reinforcing steel or reinforced concrete would be part of the standard. Some additional background, timeline. We, in February 24th, notified the developer of non-compliance on the epoxy-coated rebar requirement. On March 1st, the authority requested proposed solutions from the developer. And then on March 22nd, the authority recommended the expedited dispute resolution process to resolve the issue. The developer declined that invitation. And then between April 5th and May 9th, the parties engaged in the standard written protest process. And then on May 15th, the developer referred this to the Dispute Resolution Board. And that, as a result of an open records request from media, Attorney General's opinion was requested on whether those discussions and dispute resolution process were public. So we are, in essence, waiting for the Attorney General now to rule on whether that process is public or not. Why epoxy-coated rebar? Again, there was about an 8-week period that everybody had an opinion, it seemed, on epoxy-coated rebar. But back to the technical planning and the requirements for long-term, they were obviously long-term ownership and maintenance of bridges and railroads had not been finalized during the initial part of this discussion. North Dakota Department of Transportation was in the process of changing its standard specifications to increase the places of which epoxy-coated rebar would be required. County specifications generally followed North Dakota DOT requirements. The Army Corps was questioning how the authority would ensure longevity of the structures given the P3 delivery model. And after considerable discussion, the decision was made to require all reinforced steel for structures to be epoxy-coated. This requirement was added to draft 3 of the RFP, and the language was modified in draft 4 and remained unchanged thereafter. The epoxy-coated reinforcing steel for concrete and structures provides higher standard of durability and long-term performance. A little bit about this dispute resolution process. Within 20 days of being referred, parties submit their copies of any written evidence or documentation. Evidence is presented at hearings. DRB issues recommendations for resolution within 10 days thereafter. Each party then responds to those recommendations within 10 days of receiving the recommendations. And if the dispute remains unresolved, either party may seek reconsideration only when there is new evidence to present. Binding, if accepted by both parties. Important to note, the process brings both parties together for a compromise, if you will. If decision rejected by one or both parties, next steps is mediation, which then has to be within 7 days, and then 30 days of the selection of a mediator. If no resolution through the mediation, the final step is litigation. Again, that gives you kind of an impact of the DRB process. Oops. I think that was the last slide. So that's a real quick summary of the epoxy-coated rebar issue that we've been working on. I will also share that, as you know, the executive director resigned, and we are now in the process of going through screening, and we anticipate we'll be making an offer to a qualified candidate about 5 weeks from now or so to assume the position of executive director for the flood diversion project, and that will relieve Mr. Redlinger and Mr.
I think the question that comes up, we saw a lot of rebar today in our tour. It's not all coated, I presume. So they're continuing to build as they read the contract. Or, I mean, there's some been used that doesn't meet what you thought it was supposed to be. I mean, that's the question. Are they still building as what they perceive the contract requires?
I'm going to ask Chris to come back up maybe to comment on that.
Yeah, thanks, Senator Sarvag. I just want to point out that, yes, they are continuing to do work as they interpret the plans. Some of that is certainly at some risk to them, but just point out too that one of the provisions of the project agreement is that we do continue to progress work purposefully under the intention of not having us just get totally stalled out and not make any progress while we try to resolve disputes. So yes, the work that's underway is ongoing. Yes, we understand that pending the outcome of a dispute board, we'll have to have a furthering discussion of what that means for the work that was completed. But yeah, the work is continuing as our RVA and ASN have determined under the PA that they think the work should be completed. So.
Okay. And Tony, Representative Swantek has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Grinberg, the question is, who comprises the Dispute Resolutions Board, the DRB? Maybe I missed that in there, but who is that comprised?
There's a mediation process that's selected with industry experts. I believe each party submits one name, and then it's The process selects experts in the area that's under question.
And then this might be a question, Mr. Chairman, if I can proceed for Chris. Are all portions of the project expected to have epoxy rebar, or is there certain parts of the project that you expect to have epoxy?
Yeah, the way we intended the TRs to be written is that all concrete that's like poured concrete would have, that requires a reinforcing, would have epoxy coated bars in it. So yes, it would be all concrete that would be poured for the entire project. Yep.
Senator Louie.
Chris, another question for you, I guess. Same rebar, what's the lifespan of rebar that does not have the epoxy coating versus the rebar that has it? And does it make a difference on the distance or the closeness that that rebar is to the outer surface of that poured structure?
Yeah, generally speaking, you know, there is no set science on exactly how long any piece of rebar will last. There's certainly concrete poured over 100 years ago that still is in place. So a lot of it depends on the environment it sits in. Generally speaking, if you're talking about bridge decks, which has had the most study done on it, they've been able to extend bridge lives by maybe up to 20 years at times with the use of the epoxy bars. Also saves having to fully replace bridge decks typically. The wearing surface still wears out. There's still the de-icing salts. What was your second question? Just want to make sure I understood that one right.
The distance from the rebar, the place
cover.
rebar to the surface?
Yeah, generally speaking, most guidance documents would allow you to modify the clearance distances if you were using some other method of protecting that concrete. Again, that was part of our rationale for including it was there's a lot of interpretation in those specifications, and we wanted to leave that judgment as much in the hands of the developer as we possibly could.
And then what about the diameter of the rebar itself?
The overall strength of the rebar doesn't change at all. Whether you use epoxy coated bars or not, it's still the base steel still creates the base strength. There are a few minor detailing changes. The slipperiness, if you will, of the epoxy coating, typically the bars are overlapped a little bit longer where they are joined together just to give a little bit extra length for them to develop their full strength. But beyond that, the overall strength of the bars is the same whether you're using epoxy bars or plain.
And how about the same bar, epoxy coated or plain, cost differences?
That varies a little bit. Generally speaking, it's a little more expensive because there's a process to coat it. I don't know offhand exactly what the material differences are. And there is typically a little bit more labor involved just with the handling of that. You have to be a little more careful with it to not damage the bars as much as a plain bar. So.
Senator Rohrs.
Yeah, Chris, if I could, I noticed that the core components out there, they did not have much epoxy coated rebar. Why all at once the huge amount of concern on the non-core projects?
Sure. I'll maybe give you a couple of examples that are, it's more philosophy. We required our developer to use the core documents for how they would place concrete cover and how they would design their structures. However, there's some judgment in all of those tables, and from, again, getting back to some of the concerns of the Corps, they take a very conservative approach to how much cover they provide. So, for instance, there's an extra requirement for cover over areas that are prone to scour or erosion or have water flowing by them. The Corps of Engineers basically uses that extra cover everywhere on their structures that could ever see water. What we've seen with the developers, they've used that higher standard of cover where there's high impact or very, very high flow of water, so it's more limited use in places. And those are some of the judgment things we just really didn't want to get into a fight about, which is why we just said maybe it's better to just require the epoxy bars. That gives us a little bit of extra protection, if you will, depending depending on how they would interpret the cover side.
Any other questions? Representative Hager.
Thank you, Chair Soderwag. I don't know if it's for Chris or Tony, but I'm just wondering, could you guys refresh me on the funding of the P3 project, like federal, North Dakota, Minnesota, and just kind of refresh the committee on what the commitments and required and what the allocations were?
I won't remember the exact numbers. I think Tony and I are probably both challenged that way, but I can give you the general. So in general, the way we did the split delivery, which was a special condition that we did with the Corps, if you frame a typical federal project, the federal government will put a percentage of the project in and they kind of spread that everywhere. What we did with this project is we isolated, basically we took all of the federal funding that was authorized, and the Corps of Engineers is using that to design and construct the southern embankment and the 3 big structures. What we did then is we took all the local and state funds and put those into the P3 project. There's also some funding from the state for some of the in-town work and some of those other features as well, but generally speaking, the channel doesn't have any federal funds directly tied to it. That's all state and local dollars that are tied to paying for the channel, and the federal funds are all exclusively used in the southern embankment. So I know we would have information on what those numbers were, but that's a general split of things, if that helps answer the question.
Can I continue?
Continue.
More specifically, you know, being that this is protecting both sides of the river, North Dakota's allocation is pretty much taken care of. How's Minnesota doing?
Minnesota continues to work on their funding portion between the city of Moorhead and Clay County. I think the number at hand is around 52 million. Last session, they were unsuccessful with the bonding bill, but efforts are already underway for the next session, going back to the St. Paul for the Minnesota pieces for the projects that remain.
Continue.
And do they anticipate, or does the authority anticipate success in that? And if not, what kind of contingencies are there?
Great question. We'll continue to evangelize the project and work with our partners in Minnesota. And I know it has the attention of elected officials on the Moorhead side, Clay County side, as well as St. Paul. And it's just a matter of continuing to work with the leadership and bring it home.
All right, thank you.
Senator Louie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A while ago, we had a meeting in Christine in regard to when the project was first put into place. The community of Christine was promised a certain mile by mile berm put up around the community. And I don't know where it is right now, but the meeting that we had there was that they were trying to, the diversion authority, were trying to cut that basically in half to make that berm half of what it was originally agreed upon. Where is that today, and why was it even thought about being changed?
So the diversion authority's perspective on that originally was to try to stage that project to grow with the city of Christine. So we had in our agreements that we would build what would be a reasonable project today that would be allowed to be expanded in the future if that need became required. The city of Christine preferred to just build the entire project up front. So that process was just a process of negotiation. I think we've pretty well settled on an alignment now. Christine is working on the permittability of that project. I think they're most of the way through that, so they're starting their preliminary design and starting to meet with landowners to build the project that is both acceptable to both the authority and to the city as well. And it's intended now to be an ultimate project versus a staged one.
Any further questions for Chris or Tony? If not, thank you. And I think it's just to be noted, because they used to have to come every quarter, and we kind of felt that wasn't necessary to report that often since we had committed our funding, but it wasn't asked to have this addressed in front of this committee, just for the fact, to put it on the record, the concerns, because even though we've fully funded our share of $850 million, we still are a partner in it as a state, and we will be making payments for the next 17 years on our share of it. So please keep us abreast, and we'll see what the future brings. So thank you. Our next item on the agenda is we're going to move up the 2 p.m. The presentation of Red River Retention Authority. Andrea had a call to deal with, so we're adjusting. So Brian, where's he? There, Brian Feuder is going to tell us about the Red River Retention Authority.
Yes, Senator Sorvag and members of the Water Topics Committee, I appreciate the opportunity from the Red River Retention Authority to present to you today. One of the biggest things, we had a partner summit in the end of July of this last year in East Grand Forks, and did a little strategic planning there at that session. And one of the things that was brought up as far as what can the Red River Retention Authority do to better implement and better reach the goals and our visions and the mission of our organization. And one of the first things that was brought up was education. And not just education of the public, but education from everybody from the top down. And so this is a prime opportunity for us to do so, and so I really do appreciate that. My name is Brian Feuder. I'm originally from Breckenridge, Minnesota, and I took over the executive director here from Keith Weston a little over a year ago. And it's been an exciting time to get dived into some of these things and to work with people on these different opportunities that we have available to us. And so one of the things that I found out when I first started working for us is we got that word authority in our name. And so a lot of people get us confused with the Flood Diversion Authority. And you know, it's a great bunch of people. We like to be confused with them. They're doing a great job, a real engineering marvel sometimes in those areas. But we're the Retention Authority and not the Diversion Authority. And we are focusing on a much broader area than just the diversion project. We do have the opportunity to utilize some of the benefits of the diversion project towards our numbers and meeting our goals. And one of the things I keep saying is I hope we never see water run through that thing. So, but I don't think I'm going to get my wish. So I will continue with that. So a little bit of background on the Red River Retention Authority. We were created through a joint powers agreement between the Minnesota Water Management Board, or the RED Board, and the North Dakota, or the Red River Joint Water Resource Districts in North Dakota. And that joint powers agreement was created in May of 2010. And really the purpose of the creation of the Red River Retention Authority was for the purpose of prioritizing and coordinating flood retention efforts within the basin of the Red River of the North. A very unique watershed. One of the only ones that flows truly north. And so I think we're all very familiar with what happens when water thaws in the south and tries to flow north over ice. We run into a lot of problems. And so it's a very unique opportunity, a very unique situation that we deal with in the Red River Basin. And there are a lot of dedicated people that are working alongside not only the Red River Retention Authority, but the other organizations within the valley also. And so our primary purpose of the Red River Retention Authority is to ensure cooperation and coordination of retention projects within the basin. Okay? Retention is basically temporary storage of water off the channel. Okay? And so when we work with that, we're working again between the watershed districts in Minnesota, which there are 7, and the 14 water resource districts in North Dakota, which there's a little bit of difference in how those are laid out. In North Dakota, the water resource districts are laid out by the county. And then if there's areas or watersheds that are shared between counties, they form joint water resource districts in North Dakota. And the Red River Joint Water Resource District is the combination of all 14 of those districts in North Dakota. Minnesota, they delineate the different watersheds by the actual NRCS watersheds that are established in there. So there's a little bit of difference in governance between the two states. So again, it's part of our mission as a retention authority to help move things along and help to prioritize and work with the different entities on both sides of the Red River throughout the basin to ensure that we are providing some level of flood prevention. And so if we look at a map here that I've got on the board, you can see the member districts. We are missing two fairly good-sized districts that are not part of the Red Board in Minnesota. That's the Sand Hill Watershed District and the Buffalo Red Watershed District. They had the opportunity to join the Red Board when it was formed. They chose not to. The way that the boards are funded is through taxation and assessments, and so they felt that they had a large enough system there that they would not benefit so well from being part of the Red Board. In North Dakota, all of the areas are there. Of course, the Devil's Lake watershed is also a sub-basin of our Red River basin. Jeff Frith here is very, very well attuned with the Devil's Lake watershed basin, and we work pretty hand in hand with those folks too to see if there's other things that we can do, especially on the northern end of the valley. So our vision of the Red River Retention Authority is to really looking at reducing those peak main flow and tributary flood flows by 20%. And to do that, we're looking at the use of water retention throughout the basin. And so when we, like I said, when we talk about water retention, it's temporary storage of water to time the release so it doesn't impact the basin all at the same time. The longer we can spread out the spring runoff, the summer storm runoffs, the longer we can spread that out, the less water, the less height, and the less depth that water is going to get throughout the basin. Our mission is to ensure joint and comprehensive and strategic coordination of these retention projects, all in the fact of trying to alleviate flooding. And like I said, I'm originally from Breckenridge. I served as emergency manager for the city of Breckenridge and Wilkin County during the wet years. I actually took over that position in 1998 after Jack Thompson retired after 97. Personally, my family has lost property. We were very negatively affected, not only in the flood of 97, but in other floods in the Breckenridge area. So as a member of the fire department and the EMS squad down in that area for 21 years, I can personally attest to the damages and the devastation that can happen to communities when they experience flooding. And it's not just the communities that are experiencing this flooding, it's also our rural landowners, the smaller communities, the homeowners out in those rural areas too. And so we concentrate, and I think we've done a really good job of taking care of most of our large communities. Now we have to take a look at what can we do to help out those rural areas. And so that's part of the things that we are looking at currently. So our goals are really project coordination, project construction. Our watershed districts and our engineering firms that we work with, the consultants, they do a great job with that. They're experts in what they do. We trust them to do what they need to do, and our results are good. Permitting and environmental review. That gets to be a real tangled up mess at times, especially when we start bringing in multiple governmental agencies. And of course, if we bring in the federal agencies, that can add another layer of frustration, bureaucracy, that can postpone projects. Nothing happens fast in the flood in the flood world except for when the flooding occurs. That seems to happen quick, but planning to construct projects to alleviate flooding is a very slow process. And then of course we have funding. Funding issues are, of course, nothing's cheap, nothing's free. The way we fund our projects is through taxation, through the assessments of watershed districts and things like that. And then we also come to the state, and through Director Travnick's office, we are allowed to get some cost sharing through that. The state of North Dakota is very supportive of what we do. The state of Minnesota is a little bit different, especially with this last year with no funding or no bonding bill that was passed. We've got projects that are kind of laying in limbo right now. And we're also seeing some of the things that have happened in the past, and I'll visit with you a little bit about that. The PL 566 program was what we call the small watersheds program. And that back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, we started building a lot of different flood structures, retainment structures, earthen levees, things like that. And what has happened over the years is that they had a design life of about 50 years. And most of them are reaching 70 years, so they've exceeded their design life. And if we look at the state of North Dakota specifically, throughout the state of North Dakota, there are 50 PL 566 dams located in North Dakota. 42 of those 50 are located in the Red River Basin. And so these dam structures are exceeding their life limits. They need to be rehabilitated. They need to be taken care of. Of these 42 dams, 33 were constructed prior to 1974, so those have long exceeded their life expectancy. And then we have 6 of those dams that are classified as high hazard potential dams, where if they were to fail, there is a possibility of the loss of life and devastation to property. And so those are all located right here in our Red River Basin. And federal funding has come through to help us build these, but they were a little short-sighted as to what are we going to do 50, 60, 70 years down the road. And now these are in need of being really rehabilitated. If you are familiar with the Elm River dams, Cass County, Trail County, Steele County, we're currently doing rehabilitation projects on those. That's really going to be very beneficial for our areas in that watershed. But we still have more work to do. And just by estimates through NRCS, if we were to continue a few of our projects, the high hazard dams, those 6 high hazard dams, to rehabilitate that is roughly, the federal government's portion of that is roughly $74 million. And we are understanding that, we're pumping about $20 million a year on average for the past 7-10 years. And that has given us some influx. And then we had the bilateral infrastructure program that dumped another $118 million into the system, got a lot of projects off the ground and running and started, and now here we sit with no ability to move them forward. And so that comes back to the locals to try to finish those projects. And eventually, like I say, the state of North Dakota has been very generous and very helpful in getting our projects moving forward and keeping these projects going. But without the federal government pitching in and helping us out, we may be coming back to you for additional funding to prioritize and to continue the construction of these projects. And so that's one of the things that I'm also starting to do a little bit more work with, as far as working with the communications to let people know where our needs are. I will be going out to Washington here in November with Colin Peterson's group, Midwest Ag Council, and going out for a fly-in out there to see if we can get a hold of the ears of a few of the legislators out there to say, what can we do to ease some of this burden that's going to be ultimately dumped back on the locals if we can't get some federal funding. And with that, I guess I would thank you again for the opportunity to visit with you, to give you a little overview of the Red River Retention Authority, some of the problems that we're looking at, some of the potential issues that we're going to be facing, and some of the things that we're going to be fighting for. So thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Last session, and it come in right at the very beginning, but I think it was through your authority, I know Keith was involved, but it was a request for, I think it was 13 or 14 million for a pilot project on retention.
Yes.
Pilot projects. And we didn't feel we could come up with that funding. We did, you did, like you said, have the authority to apply to the Water
Right, yes.
Commission for money, and we did set up discretionary, so there could be some available. But I guess where I'm going, is that request or that still being looked at? Is that something that you're looking at coming next session? Or maybe, I don't know if you know the specifics of
Right.
it. but-
I don't have the specifics here with me right now, Senator, but I know that we did do some pre-planning and some looking at some projects through some RCP project funding that we had about 12 million that came through NRCS to do some projects up and down the basin. A lot of those projects were looked at. They had some planning done to them. I'm sorry to say, not a lot of them moved on to construction. So we've got some really nice 3-ring binders sitting on shelves in water resource districts right now. But the nice thing is once the planning has been done, we can go back and reopen those, and we don't have to at least go through that total process again. So if there is interest in rehabilitating, or I shouldn't say rehabilitating, but breathing life back into those projects, we've got a good base to start on. And so that those fundings that were appropriated for that were generous and did a lot of really good for helping us out in the future.
And I would hope you would keep the discussion,
Yes.
But coming in on the process early in the money, I don't know, because, and I'm saying a lot because we're dealing with a lot of these issues, but our northeast corner of our state, as you know, and it has lots of problems.
Yes.
And we're not going to dike that, and they've got they've got all over, and that's the one area that I think, and that's where I've talked to some of those legislators, retention is about the only hope we have,
Right.
I think, up there, to mitigate some of their concerns. So, we turned it down. I'm not saying we can even afford it next, but I hope you still keep working and
Yes,
coming
we
with
will.
those ideas, because
Yes.
I think it's, at least in that part of the state, and maybe a lot of parts, it's about the only hope they have to keep any control over their water deal, from my opinion. But Senator Louie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Feuder, can you tell us what kind of projects you have going on right now that that are in the works, just very quickly?
Right now, the main three that we're looking at right now are those 3 Elm River rehabilitation projects. And so those are earthen structures that hold back a considerable amount of storage there. And those are being done. We're also looking at what's going to happen with Belen Dam, Matachek Dam. Those are some of the bigger items that we're looking at. Bourbony Dam up in Pembina, that was purposely breached because it was posed an imminent threat of failure, and so that was purposely breached. What are we going to do with that to continue that moving forward? There's got to be some planning done with that. There are some structures that are being considered on the Tongue River. Some of those, I believe, are going to potentially move forward to construction here in the next year or so. The Senator Young Dam is looking at needing some rehabilitation. Larimore Dam, again, we're talking between those 7 facilities that we're currently working on, roughly about $74 million just in the federal side of that. So we've got a considerable amount, but those are those larger projects. And of course, we're always looking at what can we do to add retention. And now we get into this kind of a struggle. We've got to look for ways to build new retention to protect our floods, our communities, and we also have to be able to maintain the ones that are already constructed. And so we're running into almost needing almost a double budget to handle those things. The Red River Retention Authority, we do not necessarily handle any money. We help get that to the agencies that are through the Red Board or through the Joint Board so that it's dispersed out to the water resource districts and the watershed districts appropriately. So we're not a funding agent per se. We can be the ones that reach out and request funding, and we can have the ability to be the principle on grants and things like that. But yeah, as far as Senator Luick, as far as the different projects that we've got, those 7 dam rehabilitation projects are really the ones that we're focusing in on right now. We're always looking for out-of-the-box ways to provide for retention and, you know, what hasn't been thought of already. I just had we had a discussion with the renewable grid energy, the Harmony Solar Farm project here that's going in west of Fargo. 1,600 acres of solar. Is there a way that we can add retention to a project like that? We had some conversations. They're far enough along in the process right now that if we were to jump in with them, we would drag them down. So they're ready to sink the shovel. If we jump in with them, it would just slow it down and it wouldn't be beneficial for them at that time. But we're always looking for those new and out of the box types of ways to add retention to the basin. Land prices being what they are, farmers having willingness to work with us to provide for these projects, it's always a challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any further questions? If not, thank you for the update.
Thank you, Senator.
Is that, oh, Andrea is back. Are you, okay. We'll go up to the 115 then, and Director Tranvik.
Okay, thanks. Just making sure this is still on. All right, good afternoon. For the record, I'm Andrea Travnik, the Director to the Department of Water Resources and the Secretary of the State Water Commission. Thanks for adjusting the schedule just a little bit. Today, we also have our pre-commission meeting today for the commissioners, so just wanted to make sure that we got them briefed up on some of the things going on with the Southwest Pipeline project. So I know in working with Senator Sorvag, just trying to do a little bit of an overview of wrapping up. We know we've been at this interim committee for almost 2 years here, 1.5 years. And as we're going into the next legislative session, just giving a little bit of an update on where we are with some of the projects, and then also where we see some of the discussions going into this next legislative session. And of course, as always, the department is always open to any sort of meetings, clarification, questions. So just always want to make sure you know that our door is open. Because sometimes it's water, it gets a little complex. Sometimes there's misunderstandings of what this agency does or does not do. So I always just think, let's have a conversation and figure out the next steps. So as we look at our project development and funding overview, we know that there's always lots of discussions related to the buckets. So we are working on getting our the next 25-27 budget proposal into the governor next week. We're always an agency that gets an extension just because, of course, we're dealing with those revenue forecasts. But this is where we left the 23-25 with the purpose funding. A lot of discussion related to the state-owned projects or the capital assets, where you can see with the Southwest Pipeline, that was that $80 million. That ties into the water treatment plant that they're looking to get started on here later on this fall, the NAS project and Devil's Lake. Water supply, there was $316.2 million. Discussion related to the water treatment plant for Bismarck. You can see what WAS was able to get. Red River Valley water supply, and then of course other water supply projects underneath that bucket. Flood control will continue to be another topic too for this next biennium. So Mouse River got that $76.1 million last biennium. I think they'll be coming back for those discussions this next biennium that they've submitted into the water development plan. Valley City, $13.2 million, Mandan, $12.3 million, and then other flood control projects is that $14.1 million. Rural Water, they ended up with the $52 million for their bucket. We also know this last session, right, the bill was passed in order to have tribal nations be able to come and get cost share funding. So I know that that'll be a discussion this next legislative session too, just trying to figure out where they'll have probably some of the municipality water supply projects, rural water projects, and just trying to figure out where their projects fit into the buckets that already exist. And then we've got general water, 10.5 million, and discretionary at that 9 million. So what we did is we also just put together where have the dollars gone so far? So what have the commissioners approved at this point in time, knowing we still have about a year left, right, of this biennium. So you could see that on the capital assets, the state-owned projects, that's where we're going to be looking at trying to get that water treatment plant out the door for some bidding here for Southwest Pipeline later on this fall. So that's why you don't see a lot of dollars coming out of that bucket at this point, but more to come on it. Also with NAS, you've heard we've been delayed on a couple things, so that's why that's not moving as quickly as we would like, but we continue to work with the Army Corps of Engineers and others as we work on that project. But water supply, so you've got 51.3 million left within that bucket. Flood control projects, 35.3. Rural water, 18.3. General water, 6.2. And then those discretionary funds have not spent some out of there at this point, but there might be some things coming up here in the next 6 to 8 months related to that. So a couple updates too on cost share program updates. This is where we just continue to try to update the policies as quickly as possible as we're seeing different discussions or different instances that have come up. So WebGrad certification, just trying to make sure that everybody's always following all the applicable laws. So you would think that that would just be a general understanding, but we're just really making sure that that's black and white in all the different pieces of our policy. And then also just laying out the pre-application policy. So again, compliance with the applicable laws. Operation and maintenance, so added the operation to O&M definition. And then there was a lot of discussion a couple commission meetings ago related to what should the role of the commission and the resources trust fund dollars be related to meter replacements. So that was voted on to be ineligible at this time. That is something they should be looking at in their own capital improvement plans. And then prioritization guidance. So looking at trying to make sure what's high and moderate priorities and prioritizing those first 6 months that they're able to come right away to get the dollars since they're in the water development plan. Another thing though that has come up that we're actually briefing the commissioners on today, and there'll probably be some decisions coming in October, currently being developed is a program violation and consequence policy. So if we really do have some of those folks or contractors that come and have falsified some information in order to get some dollars, trying to figure out how the commission deals with that as well. So really having some serious conversations on this. So hopefully we'll get some of the cost share policy updated in October related to that. So we know that we're an agency that does have a significant amount of dollars for really important projects, and we're just hoping that everybody's good actors as they are submitting different vouchers and trying to get things paid back, that everybody's being open and truthful related to that.
Andrea, is that going to reduce the carryover, or just these shouldn't have been funded in the first place? What you're talking about?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, so no, completely different thing. So it doesn't have anything to do with the carryover. It just has when a contractor is submitting to get reimbursement, making sure what they're asking for reimbursement is actually what they're doing.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Also discussion this last biennium over this interim here was the basic asset inventory assessments. So really trying to make sure that we do have the cost share sponsors that are doing that capital improvement planning. So we have the program started here July 1st, 2024. We did have the working groups in place where it wasn't just this agency that was coming up with the ideas that should be included in this. We worked with Rural Water, we worked with League of Cities. So I think this has landed in a really good place. And and we also cost share on this. So this gives them an opportunity to, as they're looking at their assets, as they're looking to do some of their own planning ahead on different projects as well. So this helps us too, as we're looking at the projects that they're submitting. So this has been a really important tool. And of course, we'll all be learning through it together since it's a new program. And then as we get into the 2025 Water Development Plan, that's where we saw many of some of the legislators and the commissioners. I know we've got some of the commissioners in the room today where they hosted the basin meetings around the state here. And this is where we had over 600 submittals that came in to be considered, over 500 of them to be considered for the 25-27 biennium. And you can see just where, we continue to increase. So for 25, 27, $1.4 billion is what the request is for water infrastructure projects across the state. And you can see where that breakout is with the regional water supply at 544.4, municipal water 344.3, flood control that 132, rural water 229, conveyance 116, general water 49.9. So this, of course, is where all the discussions, how do we prioritize these projects, high, moderate, low, and just knowing that there's a lot of important work that needs to be out there across the state. And this is where we get to roll up our sleeves, knowing that our budget is not this large, but this just gives you an idea for a 2-year period what people are looking for. So just sorry.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Andrea, on that last slide, how many of those are actually carried over from year to year?
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Or session to session, biennium to biennium?
Right, so as you're looking ahead, right, so these would be all relatively new projects, but we also know that, for instance, Mouse River is tied into that flood control, so the dollars that they want. Red River Valley Water Supply, we know that that's tied into the 544.4. And so those are some of the larger projects that we were expecting to see in there, but then also many of them are new projects also.
Then dollar-wise, of that 1.4 billion, how much of that is new money or new asks?
So that's all new. This is not the carryover dollars at all. So this does not include your carryover.
I hope you didn't put it all in your budget.
I've got a week to figure it out. So this map we've been using quite a bit for the NAS project, just showing as you go from Lake Sakakawea, going north up into Minot and the other communities. So looking at those ongoing projects with the Biota Water Treatment Plant, Snake Creek Pumping Plant, many of you might have seen that on 83, some of the construction this summer, where we've completed construction, and then those future projects that we're working on. So just want to give you just an update of what's been spent for 23-25, working with the city of Minot, what we've had come in from federal funds, and what's been spent with the Resources Trust Fund. So the ongoing construction that we have going on right now is the Snake Creek Pumping Plant for the intake, discharge pipeline connecting the Snake Creek Pumping Plant to the transmission line, the Biota Water Treatment Plant, the Botno Reservoir and Pump Station, and then the goal is, right, we were hoping that we'd be able to move water this year. We're hoping that it's going to be next summer, next fall, and that's because of some of the supply chain issues that we had. And then also we're working on the permanent intake pipeline and screen structure, and that's where we're having conversations with the Army Corps right now, because we did have to redo a design a little bit related with that permanent intake, so we're just trying to get through that next step. It'll be sitting with the Corps then for another 12 to 18 months again, but again, that's for the permanent. But we still should be able to get water moving through the other discharge pipeline, hopefully next fall. Southwest Pipeline Project, so again, this is the map that we use quite a bit just to show where the different pipelines are going and the different communities that are being served. And some of the construction updates that we have here. We continue to work on some of the hydraulic improvements associated with the project. You can see that we've spent that $10.75 million for expenditures so far. The supplementary intake, this is where I know we've been briefing you that we have been in that mediation process. We do have the last mediation meetings coming up here in November in Minneapolis. So hopefully we can come towards some sort of solution so we can figure out our next steps on that. A lot of discussion too related to the transmission, the west zone. We know that we've got a lot more development going on in the southwest corner of the state. So not only things related to the presidential library, but some of the things that Medora wants to do, and even further west of Medora. So we're hearing a lot of different, beach and different discussions out there. So with the commission, we had just passed this last commission meeting. We are in the design phase, looking at 3 different types of designs. One, how the Southwest Pipeline has traditionally been designed, and then going 20% higher of capacity, and then above that, what would be the next pipeline capacity, so that the commissioners can really start to look at weighing out those benefits with costs, right? So just trying to see what that cost is and that incremental cost if we go another pipeline size higher. We just know that there's a lot of different economic development opportunities that's looking for a significant amount of water, and we just want to make sure that this main transmission line is not underbuilt right off the bat. So really trying to make sure we're getting a lot of input from different stakeholders, different economic development, the city of Dickinson, other Medora, everybody. So we've had a lot of different phone calls on that. Also moving forward with the final design for the North New England area, Burt to Hebron expansion, and then Southwest Water Treatment Plant that I had mentioned, where you see that we're hoping that we can get bids expected to begin in October. So that's where you'll see that start to make some progress there, and that's a 30-month construction project. Devil's Lake, we know that also this year, right, a lot of moisture, a lot of rain that came back into this region of the state again. So we've been working really hard, pushing the outlets the best that we can over the operating season. We will probably be the highest output on the outlets over the last 5 years by the time that we get to the end of the season. I'm hoping we'll just see what freeze up does, but hopefully we can get most of the month of October working those east and west end outlets. But I know that we were able to be on with the Devil's Lake Joint Board yesterday, just giving some updates related to that. And then also just trying to make sure that we continue to have all the infrastructure operating the way that it should be and modernizing it as we see fit, working with our contractor on that. So as we look at managing North Dakota's water resources, you're still going to hear a lot from us related to collecting real-time data. So our pushing remote sensors will continue to be front and center for us. You'll see more on that too this next legislative session. You can see where we've got 540 of these units that are currently operating. Also continue to try to put some rain gauges and soil moisture sensors, because this all really does help in trying to make decisions related to those water permits, also related to if we see any flooding situations, just really how can we be more reactive, proactive in how we're managing the great resource of water here in North Dakota. So more on that, but this really is been important to the agency, and I think important just to other stakeholders as well. And you can see that we are getting a presence unit added out at the Grand Farm too, just so there's a lot of those different types of sensors at Grand Farm, so we just want to make sure that North Dakota's sensor was out there as well. Some of you might have also seen the AEM surveys being collected. I think it was just within the last month. So doing some collections over in the Kidder, Stutzman County area, also in the Sargent, the Richland County area. So this is extremely important to us as we identify, the aquifers. So making sure that we have this data that assists with the permit decisions as well. So this has been important. We've been doing this over the last several biennium and just trying to capture as much information as we can. So this has been very valuable. So appreciate this being added as one of our optionals last biennium. Also, I think you've seen some of the maps that we have put out here before, just recognizing with our aquifers across the state, especially over on this side of the state, and a little bit farther south, with it, we're starting to see areas, where we might not be able to give a lot more permits out of the aquifers. You might be able to squeeze one or two more. Otherwise, you start to impact the current permit holders, and we know that we can't do that. So looking for opportunities on managed aquifer recharge. So we were able to do just a broad-based study across the state, trying to identify which aquifers might be suitable for this. So we have this statewide assessment that's taken place. We have a map out there, and currently we're working on an RFP right now to do a phase 2. So identifying those aquifers where we think that managed aquifer recharge would be beneficial, and then doing some more modeling on them so we can just figure out if they really would be helpful, and then just trying to figure out how we get that infrastructure in place for those. So I think this is a really good, there was a lot of states that had questions on this as we sit on the Western States Water Council, and so this is where many conversations need to go in the future on these opportunities in the state. Other studies that we've been working on in the background is the Red River bathymetry, so just trying to get some more of that up-to-date real-time information as we look at different changes in the hydraulics and the hydrology. An irrigation study, a lot of interest related to irrigation and trying to get more within the state, utilizing the Missouri River and other areas. So we've been able to partner with the Irrigation Association, Garrison Diversion, and NDSU was hired in order to do that through the Irrigation Association. So more information to come on that. There was even some emails going on it today related to some of the maps associated with it. So we're looking forward to seeing what that information has. Western States Water Collection Survey, I'd mentioned our presence technology. So really seeing what other states are doing as well. Are we in line with some of the things that they're finding? How are they communicating their technology? So we're looking to hopefully get that report completed here in the next month or two, just so we can see if there's any lessons learned that we can pick up from other states on what we should be doing as far as collecting data or identifying some other areas. There was discussions related to soil moisture, partnering with universities, and just trying to think if there's any lessons learned. Finally, multi-state survey of surface water management practices. Over the last several bienniums, right, there's been a lot of discussion related to watersheds, watershed management, and there's always discussions on, well, the state of Minnesota does this or doesn't do this, and we decided, well, let's look at a whole bunch of other states. So we hired a contractor to look at 21 different states on how they're managing their watersheds. And so that's in the thick of it right now, just trying to see, same type of thing. Is there anything that could possibly fit North Dakota? Is North Dakota just completely unique? But we know right now that it's managed at the county level. We've got some joint water boards. But I think this will also help be a helpful blueprint on next steps that we might want to think about with our various stakeholders on surface water management practices within the state. Also, because there has been so much discussion related to economic development and some of these big industries that want to utilize a lot of water, we also kicked out a study related to where can potential other intakes go on the Missouri River. So we've been working with the firm to identify the 5 best locations for water intakes, as well as the 5 best locations for subsurface locations. So again, just trying to be proactive, knowing that there's various discussions on all fronts, and so if we can have a little bit of a ground truth. This one is just more of a desktop study to start, and then once we have the information, right, probably try to do another phase to go out there and get some real field data to see where we might want to be able to have locations related to infrastructure on intakes. And of course, working with MHA Nation on this as well, so just making sure that this information is open and transparent, because it could be utilized by anybody, but just felt it was really important to try to be proactive on how to utilize the Missouri River. Finally, to the report that we were tasked with by the legislator last session. So in section 19 of our bill, Senate Bill 2020, we were tasked with, we've got that lovely intake that's just south of Washburn on the Missouri River. So what are some opportunities that could be used for? And we are tasked to get that back into you guys October 1st. So we are going back and forth working with Garrison on that. Just a little bit of a teaser in it, right? There's been discussions on possibly communities of Washburn, Riverdale, other rural communities that might be able to tap into that intake, as well as a lot of different industrial needs that are up north there in that Coal Creek area. So I think it's looking at that intake, right? It's not a waste to have it built and have it sitting there. I think it's going to be extremely important for the state and for the communities moving forward. But there'll be more details in that report coming. And then just a reminder on our permit status, our dashboard. So this came out this last December. I know that there still continues to be lots of questions why the agency doesn't turn permits around quicker. As I mentioned, we are starting to get into those areas where it takes a lot more research to make sure that we're not impacting previous permit holders. And so I think really just continue to have the conversations on what we want to do moving forward on managing the water within these areas, and then just trying to get them out as timely as we can. And and of course, whenever there's any questions related to them, why is mine hung up? What's the next step? Don't hesitate to reach out to us. And then in the interim, we've touched on these before, right? We've had a lot of the red tape reduction efforts that have taken place, updating some things related to our construction permit, new water course. It has been great this interim session to have a working group with the Water Resource District, so really appreciate being able to bounce ideas off each other, and I think there's going to be some good legislation that's going to be proposed coming from us that are working together on that. And then there has been a NFIP township study that has been taking place, so we've been working really closely with Thomas on that, Paul Thomas, and the insurance commissioner and his team. where there's been a lot of discussions on where that regulatory, that flood ordinance should be at the township level, county level, just trying to make sure what those next steps are. So I think there's another hearing coming up in the next couple weeks, but just wanted to make sure you all knew that we've been involved with that, and I think that been at the table to be able to offer any feedback. And then as we're looking forward, we still plan to look at red tape reduction ideas. There's been a lot of discussion related to drain tile and water, putting that water to beneficial use. So we agree with those type of ideas. So just trying to figure out if there's anything from a red tape reduction that we can do. Also related to reservoir permitting, a lot of discussion too. I think this biennium related to stream crossing and water course determinations. And then also continued support related to the NAS authority. We were able to change that from an advisory committee to an authority this time, knowing that we're getting closer to having that project officially moving forward with having water come out of Lake Sakakawea. Just trying to decide if we're getting to a point too where we might need, whether it's an executive director or what are the other resources we need to make sure that NAS is able to function the way that they need. Is it operators? We've got a really good agreement with the city of Minot where they're going to be operating that biota water treatment plant as well as their treatment plant. But what other resources do we need moving forward? So that'll be some of the discussion also. Ongoing federal issues. So working with tracking various initiatives, right, with the Army Corps of Engineers. Right now we're watching the travel management plan through the Forest Service. We have weighed in, right, on the BLM, the resource management plan. There was definitely discussions in there related to water, so we provided our feedback on there. We know that the Army Corps of Engineers is having discussions related to levee safety and some new guidelines. So how does that impact what's happening here at the state? Also, the Army Corps, and of course in Congress right now on the Senate and the House side is the Dakota Water Resources Act. So we're tracking what's happening in there too with various discussions related to what could impact the state. Missouri River is always a topic within that, so just making sure that there's no impacts negatively to North Dakota. Bald Hill Dam operation plan, Snake Creek embankment, and NEPA. So there's plenty on the federal front to keep us busy as well, but we are just trying to make sure we're staying vigilant on all those, so making sure that we don't see federal overreach coming into the state related to water. And of course, just because water is exciting and complex and lots of different perspectives related to it, we continue to try to get out educational campaigns. I think we threw all the legislators on our list here. You can delete us if you want. But we did a 6-month campaign related to Know Your Aquifers, just trying to get more information out there related to it. I think this next session too, there will be discussion related to cloud seeding. And so in the clouds, we did about a 4-week run on different information related to cloud seeding within the state and how it's currently done. And then our next campaign is going to be understanding watersheds. So we're hoping to kick that off in the next month or two. But just really trying to figure out the best way to get information out there so that it's not always just the fake news. What really are the resources that we have and how can we all work together to try to manage them appropriately. And then finally, this is my last slide, so the challenges and opportunities. So what are the discussions that we're hearing right now, knowing when we go into legislative session? So of course, hearing a lot related to agriculture, drainage, and water conveyance. Just hoping the agency can be at the table for those discussions. Also the importance, I already talked about the managed aquifer recharge, so the importance of water reuse and recharge. I know there will be discussion related to cost-benefit analysis. And then also infrastructure and resources. So continuing on that real-time data, how we analyze that data, how it's used. On the education front, also the technical services that we need and the legal services that we need. Again, water is going to be where the fights are into the future. So just making sure that this state does have the appropriate technical folks, hydrologists, legal folks that we need to have to make sure that we're protecting what we need here at the state. And also for folks that have the different water permits, just trying to make sure that they're not impacted from the federal side as well. And then emergency response. So don't forget that we are an agency that's actively involved with the Department of Emergency Services and the Adjutant General. We had that flood on the Missouri River in February this year, and just making sure that we're always ready to assist as needed. And then those competing uses for water. So continuing to have discussions with Saskatchewan, Manitoba. Just had a discussion with the State Department 3 weeks ago related to Red River Valley water supply. So we have a lot of folks that are very interested in what we're doing here in North Dakota as we manage our water. And then, of course, those other states as well. And we've kind of touched on that as it relates to the Missouri River. So that's what I've got, just a quick overview, and excited for another legislative session, and always willing to talk through any concerns that you might have with the agency and anything we can try to improve upon, but I'll pause there for any questions.
I go back to the potential funding needs. That, why is that going up so, I mean, it's kind of disappointing when you look, and I've seen it before, but I mean, we're spending record amount of money on water. What's driving it? I know there's some big projects that affect regional, but is it the inflation? Let's take rural. I mean, I don't know what their ask is, but I mean, that's substantially over what their ask was before, or what we've given. But I know they're not getting as many projects done because of inflationary, I think. But then I hear some they're coming in right, some they're coming in wrong. Do you have any idea what's really going on there?
So,
Why it's
Mr.
going up? I mean, this is a couple bienniums a row and substantial.
Right, so Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, so I think to your point, yeah, so I think we've got inflation for sure, right? Project costs are going up. Sometimes projects are taking longer. It's been hard with competition and contractors, supply chains. But that, at the same time, you've got aging infrastructure, so you've got that as a piece, right? So they can come to this agency to replace those type of things. The other piece is now you're getting, for instance, for water supply, you're getting into areas that are the harder ones to reach, right? The more expensive to reach. So you've got that, and then as it relates to the water conveyance, that's where you can see too that 116, right? People are wanting to move water quicker, faster, and where should it go? So I think it's just all the above, right? And these regional water projects, Red River Valley Water Supply, right? We want to make sure that we are getting water moving out this direction. And those projects' costs have gone up, but you're getting to those new areas, you're getting to aging infrastructure, and then the water conveyance piece, so.
Because, I mean, I realize we're never getting them done, but like I said, if these numbers are right, we're going backwards.
Well, and Mr.
And
Chairman,
big
members of the committee, we're still, and that's where I still explain too, we're very fortunate in North Dakota to be able to have this Resources Trust Fund. Even with having the other states out here in Fargo the end of July, right, for the state and for the legislative body to have put this in place. Yeah, we're fortunate, right? Like you said, we've been spending close to over 600 million a biennium already and still not getting ahead of it.
Senator Loy.
Mr. Chairman and Andrea, so would you back up to the slide where you were talking about drawing water out of the Missouri River? How much water can we pull out of that river without getting into trouble again with Missouri or some other states on lawsuits?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I wouldn't have a number on that, right? Because we've already seen from Canada and Missouri that even just that small amount that we want for NAS and for Red River Valley Water Supply, right? So I think we just have to continue to express the importance of why we do believe we have a right to that water,
Right.
and continue to have really strong legal backing when we have to have those type of conversations. So we know that there is a large, reliable amount of water in the Missouri River, and I think just continuing to make sure we're building the projects that utilize it, I think that's what we have to concentrate on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any other question? Senator Magrum.
Thanks, Chairman. So Andrea, are there still other states looking to glom on to our Missouri River water then, too?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, yes. So that's why we're actually watching to the word of bill. So happening with the Army Corps of Engineers right now, there's a discussion in there on a study related to the Ogallala Aquifer. And of course, they've got different thoughts and ideas on how to put water back into that aquifer since it's been overutilized. So yes, so there are still other states that are watching it very closely, and that's where we're trying to make sure to be very vigilant in watching it as well.
May I continue, Chairman? Just was wondering, how are we doing with the Red River Valley pipeline?
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, so I know that they've been making progress on it. So we're not the agency that's tasked with the day-to-day on the Red River Valley water supply, so that's probably a better question for Dwayne. But I know that there's been several conversations with Garrison and with LAWA here in Fargo. And I know that that's where they've come with a big ask this next biennium, where I think they want to, of course, continue to be making really good progress on it. So I know they ran into some issues just with how wet some of the areas were where they were trying to lay pipe. So that took a little bit longer to lay some of the pipe that they were hoping to this year.
Is there any chance to shallow that pipeline up so they could actually get it in the ground? Because it doesn't seem like they would need 8 foot of cover over a 6 foot pipeline.
Yeah, and this is, all depends on, what their contractor was hired to do and how they did their engineering on it. So I wouldn't have those specifics. But I know that they are trying to do it as quickly as they can on how they've engineered it. And that's where I do know, I think the Red River Valley water supply will be a topic this next biennium, knowing that we do need to get it completed. We do need to get it built. It is a large infrastructure project, so that it is taking a long time. And of course, it was held up for a while too, so.
Then one other question. When you guys do your policy meetings, can we attend that? Because, I mean, you were talking about contractors that were probably mischievous with accessing funds through your department. And so I know in our county, of course, I talked to you about that with the Water Resource Board, was the engineering firm that is the mischievous one. So are you going to address them? Because it seems like you have, 3 engineers doing the majority of the work in North Dakota? And what if one of them is misusing their position? Is there a way that they can be penalized?
So, Mr. Chairman, member of the committees, and that's what the State Water Commission is looking at right now. So we were able to brief them on the situation that we became aware of, and then trying to figure out not only how to update the cost share policy so there has real concrete information on what the department and the commission should do as next steps. So I'm hoping in October that we can have some of that finalized. And then, of course, too, as it relates to professional boards that those groups might be a part of, also knowing that there is some information in Century Code related to falsified statements, and is there any criminal acts that go with that? So really trying to figure out all the pieces that the commission might want to consider. And of course, at that local level can decide how they want to handle that situation as well.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any other questions for Andrea? If not, thank you.
Great.
Sure, we'll be talking a lot more.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
So Chris is going to come in online now?
Yeah, he's supposed to be virtual.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Hear you but not see you. Oh, there you are.
Gonna pull up my presentation here. Okay. All right. Again, good morning, Chairman Sorva and members of the committee. My name is Chris Cattermas. I'm the Director of Administration for the Department of Water Resources, and I'm going to be providing just a quick update on the financial information. Can you let me know, can you see the PowerPoint?
Chris, this is Austin. We're unable to see the PowerPoint right now. Do you have it shared on your screen?
Yeah.
The committee does have a handout.
There we go.
Hey, we're all green here. We're good to go.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. And thank you for letting me present remotely, because, yeah, I'm trying to wrap up our budget, which is due next week, as Andrea kind of indicated. Looking at the first slide, you've seen this before, just kind of shows the breakdown of where the revenues come from for the Resource Trust Fund, which is the oil extraction tax. It is currently at 20.5%. Thing to note again is that 0.5% has a cap on it for the total revenue it can generate. That cap is $128.7 million roughly. We currently are at $22.3 million, so we have quite a ways to go before we were to hit that cap. Once that cap's reached, it'll go back to 20%. Looking at revenues through August, we are $276.1 million. We're $20.1 million ahead of the May 21 legislative revenue forecast. That is good because then that $20.1 million is then transferred into the Water Project Stabilization Fund to be available for the next biennium. Graphical representation of that. Essentially, we appear to be on a good track. I don't have any indication as to whether or not I think we'll maintain this. If you just look at how revenues have come in historically, I would anticipate they would. But again, if we stay on track, we'll be $20.1 million ahead. We'll have some additional funds for 25-27. Looking at some of the other revenues that are available for water, that end up being available for the operation of the agency and water projects. We have our investment income. Currently, we're anticipating, and that's going to be kind of the dark orange line on your presentation there. And we're anticipating about $9.1 million more than what was projected in May of 2023. The Water Project Stabilization Fund, which has a $140 million balance roughly, is interest income in there. We're currently $274,798 ahead. I do anticipate that'll increase significantly as we move towards the end of the biennium because of the rate of return we're receiving currently, and I'll cover that a little bit later here. The Water Commission Fund receives reimbursements from political subdivisions, and that's currently on track with what we anticipated during the legislative session. As I mentioned, the Water Project Stabilization Fund has a balance a little bit greater than $140 million. That was taken out of CDs that were with the Bank of North Dakota and transferred to the Retirement Investment Office due to Century Code. Century Code states that they're to manage the Water Project Stabilization Fund. They currently have those funds sitting in a cash account receiving 5.14%. For that reason, we anticipate the interest income from the Water Project Stabilization Fund to be significantly higher and closer to, I believe it was about $6 million. So it'll be definitely, $6 million. No, I apologize, $7 million. So it will be about $7 million by the end of the biennium, my estimate currently. We did anticipate $1.5 million at the end of the 21 or 23 legislative session. So we'll be about $5.5 million higher than that. Apologize. Moving on to the purpose funding. Andrea had kind of covered this, just kind of reiterating all the funding that was provided for the 23-25 biennium. This is the new funding only. And looking at where we are in approvals through the State Water Commission. The capital assets bucket, looking at that, because clearly the approvals haven't gone through, but based on this has to do with the timing of when the bids for the water treatment plant and the construction for NAS occur.
Chris, Senator Serbach, that number in the capital asset includes the line of credits, correct? At 205.
The number in the capital assets does include the $100 million line of credit. That is correct. So yeah, $100 million.
You need to understand that that's not necessarily going to be spent. It's of that 205, 100 million was the line of credits that could be used, but aren't supposed to. Well, I think NAS might be using 10, 15 million, but The rest was the secure bidding, like with the Southwest Water Treatment Plant. So that number gets a little skewed with that. So I just want to point that out.
Yep, thank you, and that is correct. We did actually enter into an agreement with the bank to have roughly $10 million available. We haven't needed and we don't anticipate using it, so I anticipate no utilization of the line of credit by the end of the biennium. Looking again at the needs, just kind of touching on that Andrea had indicated, there, even with the amount of funds we have available this biennium, clearly there are enough projects looking into the future that it's in the state's best interest to maintain some level of funding to help meet these needs for the state water projects. The 10-year projection, again, this is looking at the needs and then basing it on a certain amount of revenue per biennium that we anticipate. We are currently somewhere in between the $400 and $500 million. So again, if we were to receive $400 million per biennium, we would, in 10 years, we would still have a $1.54 billion shortfall from a total of $3.54 billion. Looking, as I had mentioned, I'm currently trying to wrap up our budget and get it submitted to the Office of Management and Budget. Our due date is actually the 20th of next week. So we will end up submitting it probably earlier than that. And then we will be having discussions with the Office of Management and Budget and the Governor's Office based on any optionals that we bring forward. And then we look forward to seeing the legislators beginning in January. I will move on here. And then one item that I will address is that this last session was the first time that the legislature has authorized the State Water Commission or the Department of Water Resources to do line item transfers between our capital assets and operating lines, and it could go both either direction. The Section 20 of Senate Bill 2020 authorized that. We could transfer a total of $9.9 million between the two. We have directed the Office of Management and Budget to transfer $425,000 from our operating expenses to capital assets for the purchase of construction equipment and equipment for the Devil's Lake project. We also then notified the Legislative Council that we had done so. The other item we're looking at is an emergency commission request. We have submitted an application to transfer $375,000 of federal funds from our capital assets line to the discretionary funding line. We are still analyzing whether or not this is going to be necessary due to some inventory assets that will be used for the operation of the NOS Biota Water Treatment Plant. Because as you know, the state owns the building, the state receives federal funds to pay for it all. However, we have a contract between Minot and the Bureau of Reclamation for Minot to operate the plant. And essentially that $375,000 is for like furniture and various other items that are more operational in nature. But since it's in the contract that we have for the construction of it, we are looking at how we can transfer either the funds or those assets to Minot. That way the state doesn't have to be responsible for inventorying them. But to give you a heads up. So again, we're kind of assessing whether or not we actually need to continue to bring it forward to the Emergency Commission, but we have submitted the application to them. I will hold it if there are any questions.
Is there any questions for Chris at this point? No? Go ahead.
That is everything I have, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay. I think the only thing I want to comment on, and I know we talked about it in one of the earlier meetings, but we've been doing a lot of talking, but so the committee members understand that line item transfer hadn't been allowed before, and we limited it just operating a capital line assets. But we also put in that $9 million discretionary fund which I think the session before we'd put 1 or 2 million, which had never had existed before. And the reason behind that, this line item transfer was requested by the water department, but the discretionary really comes with an idea from the legislature that because of the size and the complexity of everything that's going on in water, we just had to start allowing them a little more latitude, a little more freedom to make some discussions in consultation with the Water Commission. So I just want to make it clear, because there's always been tendencies not to do that, but there's just been a feeling that we just had to allow them a little freedom on some dollars to make some of these decisions, because it's just too complicated and too much going on. So I just wanted to point that out, why that has been going on the last couple sessions to work towards that. So is there any other questions for Chris? If not, good job, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot more numbers from you in the next 4 to 5 months. So, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to go to, I got to find my agenda. The next item, well, we jumped around here, so we're going to do the 2:30 item. Mr. Holm? And while they're getting set up, I'm just going to mention the reason, and we've had this presentations before on the effects of aquatic nuisance in past interms, or some of them, and there had been a request, if we would have gone on that tour yesterday, which just logistically didn't work, that we would stop and look at some of those issues along the Cheyenne too. So the next best thing is just invited him here to talk about the issues that we're having in our waterways with the aquatic nuisance species. So microphone is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Ben Holland. I work for the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. I'm the Aquatic Nuisance Species Coordinator at Jamestown. Today, I'm going to be giving you an update about what's happening in the world of aquatic nuisance species in North Dakota as it relates to 2024. So, real simple, I'm sure you guys are all aware, but what are aquatic nuisance species? They're non-native plants, animals, and pathogens outside of their native range that really have the effect, our ability to negatively affect our aquatic habitats, whether that be a recreation, the general ecology of the environment, or the economy of our state. How are they spread? ANS are spread in many different pathways. The 3 that we've identified at Game and Fish as very, very high-risk pathways are on the screen now. Docks and lifts, recreational, commercial activities using barges, tugboats, things like that, and then recreational watercraft. But there's many different pathways that aquatic nuisance species can be spread, pet releases, seaplanes, all kinds of different ways they can, hunting, all different ways that they can be spread. In North Dakota, we have 33 different species on our North Dakota aquatic nuisance species list. These species are identified to have potential impacts to North Dakota. Currently, we're sitting in pretty good shape, though. We have 8 species documented in the state. You can see them right there: common carp, curly pondweed, zebra mussels, flowering rush, Eurasian water milfoil, and 3 invasive carp species. The good news is that many of these species are limited in their range. North Dakota Game and Fish, that we manage over 400 water bodies in the state, and you can see there's a handful of water bodies that have aquatic nuisance species, and most of them are depicted there in the southeast right now. Common carp is not depicted because, common carp are in many different waterways, and they've been coming to North Dakota on rail cars since the 1890s. So they've had a long history in the state. Most species are limited in their range, though. Impacts of ANS, the impacts of ANS really range, and they depend on the environment and the species that is in question. Common impacts, though, they compete with native species for resources, they alter recreational opportunities, encumber water delivery systems and infrastructure. In that picture to the left right there, you can see curly pondweed. Curly pondweed directly competes with native pondweeds. It's often one of the first pondweeds that comes up during the springtime, and then it dies off. And what you're seeing there is a die-off of curly pondweed there at Misty Waters. It's completely covering that boat ramp right there, making it very difficult to launch a boat or fish or any other thing out there. I'm going to spend some more time, though, focusing on zebra mussels, because from a water infrastructure standpoint, zebra mussels have the greatest impact to our state. So zebra and its close cousin, quagga mussels, they originally introduced to the U.S. in the 1980s in the Great Lakes that were first found. Since then, they've been spreading westwards. Zebra mussels are kind of unique in that they're broadcast spawners, so you got a male and a female. They're about 5 inches away from each other. They release their gametes when water conditions are right. So when temperature hits certain thresholds, those gametes unite and form something called a veliger. So that veliger will free float in the water column for 2 to 3 weeks before it looks to settle on hard substrate. So that veliger will settle out on that hard substrate and then start growing into adult. And typically in North Dakota, a zebra mussel that's born in June can be an adult, ready to reproduce based on literature on its size by the end of fall. That adult can contribute to multiple spawning events. One zebra mussel female can reproduce up to 1 million eggs in a year. So this species often goes from just detectable levels to 2-3 years down the road on every hard surface in the lake. They grow up to 2 inches big and can live for about 5 years, so they are constantly just reproducing and covering substrate. They filter about 1 liter of water per day, and they actively attach to substrate, including themselves via byssal threads. So those threads allow them to attach to rocks, water infrastructure, whatever it may be, and also themselves. So they'll bioaccumulate on water infrastructure, and they can be 2, 3, 4 inches thick in some of our water bodies just after one season. In North America, quagga zebra mussels are missing their biological and physical controls that really keep their populations in check, and that's why they've really exploded here in the U.S. and in many North Dakota lakes. So what are the impacts of quagga and zebra mussels? Well, like I mentioned, their life history allows them to become a dominant biomass in the lake. Bad picture of me there, but good picture of the mussels. On the left there, those settlement samplers, they're just PVC cutouts, PVC sheeting that we put in Lake Ashtabula to monitor how much zebra mussel settlement goes in that lake in a year. That one was from last year from the crossing. Those spent about 7 months in the water there, and that was their bioaccumulation. Probably an aggregation of over 100,000 new individuals per square meter on that biomass there. With that, they can also dramatically change the food web. Remember, they can filter 1 liter of water per day, but when you have literally trillions of zebra mussels in Lake Ashtabula, that is a lot of filtration. They're redirecting the flow of nutrients from the top water column to the bottom. Some species might do extremely well under these new food web dynamics, and some may suffer. But they also, like I mentioned, you can see from this picture how easy it is to foul water delivery systems, including irrigation, hydropower, municipalities, and industry. That first picture, I'll go back here. This was actually our Bald Hill Dam, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's Bald Hill Dam water intake for the fish hatchery there. Zebra mussels were first discovered in Lake Ashtabula in 2019. This was taken last year. They lost complete capacity or flow of water, gravity-fed system to the hatchery. So they had to hook up an excavator to this to be able, or a diver had to go down, hook an excavator up to this, and then pull that out for cleaning. So just 3 years after zebra mussels were discovered in there, they're already having to mitigate this water infrastructure at the hatchery. So next question is, what are we doing about it? So ANS, I guess, in North Dakota, the worry is nothing new. Game and Fish has been working with ANS plans since the early 2000s. Our first management plan happened in the early 2000s. Since then, we've learned a lot. improved, and our second management plan was updated in 2018 and signed by Governor Doug Burgum. You know, the goal of that ANS management plan is to prevent their introduction and spread of ANS into and within North Dakota waters while mitigating ecological, economic, social impacts existing populations where feasible. And we do this through 4 key objectives, and then in those objectives, there's a set of strategies and actions. Coordination, communication, education, outreach, prevention, control, sampling, and monitoring. And so the group that is tasked with putting together this plan is actually the North Dakota Aquatic Invasive Species Committee. This group is made up of many state agencies, Water Resources, North Dakota Parks and Rec, Agricultural Department, and then many non-state partners too, like Devil's Lake Joint Management Water Board, Sport Fishing Congress, Friends of Lake Sakakawea, all interested parties who have, you know, skin in this ANS fight. So we update the ANS management plan periodically. We maintain an ANS list. We're always doing horizon scanning, say what species are on the landscape out there that could potentially impact North Dakota's waters. We discuss pertinent ANS threats or evolving ANS threats. Like 1 year, a couple of years ago, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service found zebra mussels on moss balls in pet stores. So we were chasing down moss balls in pet stores. And before then, I didn't even know what a moss ball was. But by the end of it, I'm like, I never want to see another moss ball again. So, but we and work to raise awareness. North Dakota Game and Fish, we're part of many local, regional, national partnerships. We sit on 2 national panels for aquatic invasive species. Just a task force that work together to deal with ANS issues and use the latest science to mitigate them. We also lean heavily on regulation. And the good thing about North Dakota, you know, boaters and recreation's huge in North Dakota, fishing's huge in North Dakota. You know, our regulations are simple, easy steps that really go a long way to mitigating the spread of aquatic nuisance species. You know, simply by draining your watercraft, removing attached organisms and vegetation, pulling plugs, doing simple things every single time when you're at the ramp, it goes a long way to prevent the spread of these species. As we've identified new vectors of spread, North Dakota Game and Fish has also changed our administrative rules to deal with these new vectors. You can see that dock and lift depicted at Lake Ashtabula. A lot of our lakes that we've been finding zebra mussels in are obviously highly developed cabin lakes. So we think that it's very, very easy for a dock or lift, like from Lake Ashtabula, to be purchased, you know, pre-bought and then moved to a new lake, and that's your source population right there. So we've adjusted our administrative rule to now say that docks and lifts have to sit out of water for 21 days before they're been moving. And then we've had some massive ANS education plans, mailing stuff out to cabin owners using a bunch of stuff, which I'll talk about here in a second. Another big one is commercial equipment. We actually find more zebra mussels on commercial equipment, usually related to oil activity, water infrastructure that comes in from out of state than we do recreational watercraft. A lot of times, you know, you think about putting in a pipeline, they're bringing in barges, tugboats, things like that. Those are often coming in from out of state, and usually they're coming in from Missouri River states that have zebra mussels. So we work closely with our partners with Water Resources, DOT, to mandate inspections of this equipment so that it's inspected, it's cleaned, it's drained, it's dried before going on to our North Dakota waterways. No matter what state agency you are in the nation, for ANS, education is the #1 priority. No state is out there inspecting every single boat before they hit the water. So we really got to have an educated water user base out there on the landscape who really takes pride in their waters. We do a ton of different personal contacts. I don't know how many lake associations I've talked to, how many kids events I've done, state fair, you name it. I've been to a lot of them and always willing to do more. Our digital marketing person with the North Dakota Game and Fish is kind of a wizard. She's been great for our overall program. She can get highly targeted ads to people like water recreationists who have nothing to do with hunting and fishing that we have no part of, but she can collect cell phone data from Graham's Island State Park and through that determine that you're a water recreationist and then target you with digital ads about clean, drain, dry, and protecting our lakes here in North Dakota. It's kind of creepy what she can do, but it's mighty impressive. So you can see that our social media campaign just this year generated over 6 million impressions, which resulted in, over close to 700,000 unique individuals seeing our Clean Drain Dry messaging. We're also on Google search engines, YouTube, ad networks, generating another close to 1 million impressions. TV, programmatic audio, we partnered with Midco to produce and disseminate ANS commercials. So those are going out on platforms that Midco plays, programmatic audio, and then we have lots of miscellaneous efforts, whether it be Aquatic Nuisance Species Awareness Week with our state partners or handing out pet store bags to local mom and pop stores. On the monitoring side, a big part of this is monitoring. The sooner that we can find some of these zebra mussel infestations early on, the better chance that we can contain those populations, or just any ANS in general. Some ANS, you have the chance, if you get them early enough, you can eradicate them. So we spend a good amount of time monitoring here at North Dakota Game and Fish. We monitor over 170 waters for QZM using plankton tow nets. That last zebra mussel fouled lake that we found, South Golden Lake, we actually pull plankton tow nets through the water looking for that veliger, and a veliger right there, that zebra mussel veliger that I was talking about, is what's depicted right there on the right. So that veliger is tiny, about 100 microns big, and that basically told us that, hey, we got a reproducing population at South Golden Lake. So we put on wetsuits, snorkeling stuff, and we go in there, and we're able to find a couple of adult additional mussels on the bottom of a floating fishing pier. So we're doing substrate checks, plankton tow netting, snorkeling. We're also expanding our eDNA efforts. It's pretty crazy where eDNA is going. Usually you have to have a species in hand to see if it's present in the water. Now, with a lot of lab technology out there, we're collecting water samples, sending off to a lab, and they're saying, yeah, there's some fragments of genetic material of this species present in the waterway. So it's pretty incredible what eDNA can do too. And then we're working to expand our citizen science approach. At North Dakota Game and Fish, we have 3 full-time dedicated ANS guys. So we heavily rely on citizen reports too, and working with local organizations. So, lake associations, we've been handing out PVC settlement samplers through the years, DIY information for local cabin owners to look for invasive species out there on their local lakes too. On the prevention side, we've been upping the number of watercraft inspections that we do. This year we hired about 20-ish watercraft inspectors, and that fluctuates through the season, give or take a few. But we conducted about 10,000 watercraft inspections in 2024. We got a good history of watercraft inspections in North Dakota now, and that really allows me to go in and effectively allocate our inspectors' time. So I can look at the last 5 years of inspection data, and I can say, 9% of the boats launching at Grams Island State Park have last launched on a zebra mussel infested water body, compared to this, prairie pothole lake over here that might have 0.5%. So we're going to effectively allocate our inspector time to this 9% ramp and get inspections and educate the people at those ramps. So that's what we've been doing for watercraft inspections. In addition, at our infested water bodies, Lake Ashtabula, Twin, Lemoore, we actively have a watercraft inspector roving those ramps in the summertime. If they find zebra mussels on an exiting watercraft, we work with that boat owner to decontaminate that boat before it goes down the roadway. We do a lot of commercial equipment inspections, and that really depends on the year and what the projects we're going. But some years we might look at 200 barges. Some years it might be 14. I like those 14 years, but 14 years. But you can see right there decontamination of a barge going on at Lake Sakakawea that was found with zebra mussels on it. And then we also do a bunch of facility inspections, whether it be private fish hatcheries, bait vendors, out-of-state vendors that send leaches into North Dakota, pet stores, all kinds of stuff looking for ANS. And then our game wardens are actively patrolling and also conducting ANS roadside checks out there on the landscape to look for boats that might be hauling ANS. Finally here, I kind of mentioned we're leaning heavily into technology. On the ANS side, we're also putting out prevention devices. It's a common thing we hear on a national landscape. Boat owners want tools on the landscape to help them get clean, drain, dry. So depicted on the right is just a CD3 waterless cleaning device. It's got a wet dry vac, weed grabber tools, brushes, air hose, things like that help people get clean, drain, dry right when they're leaving the landscape. We've also put in some public wash stations like at Lemoore that has zebra mussels. So people exiting the water are highly encouraged to use that wash station before, going down the roadway. And we help facilitate a couple more at Jamestown Reservoir. And then we're also using some eyelids, some virtual inspection cameras. It's incredibly hard for me to hire people in the summertime. I'm actively recruiting, high school seniors and college kids and, teachers and you name it, but it's hard to find people. But luckily there are some other options. We've been using these virtual inspection devices at a few cameras or a few accesses. So as boats go down that ramp, it activates a camera. That camera starts recording that launch. It gets sent up to the cloud and then reviewed by a team who can say, hey, that boat had vegetation on it. Send it to Ben, who can forward it on to wardens that they're just launching with vegetation. While that eyelid is taking that video, it's also talking to the boat owner. So it might say something like, hey, you are now entering Lake Ashtabula, a zebra mussel infested water body. These are the steps you need to take when coming off the water body so that you're clean, drain, dry, ready to go down the road. And I think that's been a powerful tool for a lot of the people that are out there, because we often see sign fatigue out there in the landscape. It's like you put up another sign and no one notices it. But when something all of a sudden starts talking to you on a ramp, you get some great reactions on camera from boaters. So that's what I have today. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ben, so what waterway in North Dakota is maybe the worst per size of the body of water?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, are you referring to as far as zebra mussel infestations?
Correct.
By far, Ashtabula was our first, and we see our biggest aggregations of mussels probably at that waterway. But, all those other water bodies right now are just, I would say, gaining population density. It's often the snowball. You find them undetectable, and then in a year, they're probably on people's docks an inch thick, and then within another year, they're 3-4 inches thick. The hope long term, what they've seen in some states is they have been dealing with this problem for 10-15 years, is those mussels seem to maybe reach a carrying capacity and come back down where they're not experiencing this exponential boom. But we haven't yet seen that here, and stabilize a little bit.
If I may continue. So Ben, isn't there any type of a biological or a fish or some other aquatic
Mr. Chairman,
animal that cleans those up?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, there are fish species that eat zebra mussels. You're probably not going to like them in that they're a common carp and freshwater drum here in North Dakota. But there's round gobies in their native system where they're from that will eat zebra mussels. But those fish species just aren't good enough predators to be mowing down populations there. So even on the Red River where we have those, it's not big enough to put a dent in their population.
At any point, is there any chance that it would get so bad that you would basically kill off all vegetation or all aquatic life in that?
It would really have to be circumstantial. Some water bodies, like you go on Lake Ashtabula, there's not right now. Copper treatment's a big way to eradicate zebra mussels. Copper is hard on all aquatic life. So when you do a copper treatment, you're basically killing the whole waterway, right? So on size like Lake Ashtabula, it's not possible to drain down that waterway and effectively kill off everything. If we had a zebra mussel population pop up maybe in a lake in western North Dakota that we could drain down and take care of to help prevent the spread, I think we'd probably look at taking action there.
Is it something that is spot specific in a lake or a water body? So on one side of the particular area, so you could spot kill off something?
Sure. They're looking at different treatments, and there's a lot of literature looking at low dose copper. So doing really, really low dose copper treatments, basically enough to kill mussels, but nothing else in Minnesota lakes. And it's been shown to knock back the zebra mussels there, but you have to continually do these copper treatments year after year after year. And it isn't clear whether, you're still having effects to maybe native unionid mussels that are, species of concern in different areas, or your forage, fathead minnows and things like that can be affected by copper at really low doses too. So, the long-term hopes is that someday we get a genetic control or some other kind of control that's basically the silver bullet out there that we can use in the lake. But we currently don't have that, so prevention right now is our best way forward. And hopefully, we can prevent some of these infestations and save a lot of money in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions for Ben? If not, thank you. Thank you for the update of what's going on and obviously an important part of our waterways.
And I appreciate the invite.
Well, we're exactly 1 minute within time, so we are going to take, let's not try to take the whole 10 minutes, but let's take 5-6 minute breaks. Okay, we're going to call the committee back to order. And the next item on our agenda is comments from interest person related to Sargent County Drain 11. I think we've all gotten a lot of emails over the last 2 to 3 years, probably some more than others, depending on your involvement with water and different issues. And we've had Senator Lewick here at the committee that's worked a long time on a lot of these issues similar in this. So, but what we're going to do is, we don't have a specific bill. We have kind of an issue. One of the I guess, opponents to the project, and I got to be careful with the wording, I think we all do, because I'm not sure where the line has been drawn with opposing or accepting the project, or didn't go with a vote or not vote, so I'm not trying to make judgment calls when I say this, because it's obviously complicated. So, and Liam Mulberg, he wasn't able to attend. So we have a couple that are going to speak that doesn't feel that the process was right and just give us that. But we're going to start out with those that are supportive of the project and with the water board, that we're behind it. And again, this isn't to be a debate. It's just at a high level, please. We don't need to be in all the weeds of every detail. But your side, what you feel, we are in a court of law. The courts have made decisions, but we are a political body. So this discussion needs to be centered around that. So it's Luke and Todd, right? Yeah, if you want to come up or however and start out, and we'll go that way. Yeah. And whoever speaks, make sure you state your name clearly for the record. Is there a sign-up sheet? Okay, well, just state it so he knows that you have, Austin can have your names for the record.
Are you trying to start? Yeah, hang on one second. You guys go ahead and introduce yourself. You guys want to start in on this? Okay. Lucas Szymanowski, Chairman of the Sargent County Water Resource District.
And I'm Todd Stein, another member of the board.
What we would like to start out with here is we have a petition that we circulated the last few weeks of landowners and producers that are along Drain 11 that are in support of the project. I'm not going to go through everybody's name on there, but if you guys do look, there is signatures on here of guys that are on the lawsuit against us that signed in support of the project. So I think the petition speaks for itself there. I don't think we got to talk about that anymore. So.
You don't need to tell us. We've got the information.
Yep,
so.
You got the information.
As a water board, you guys know it's our duty to take care of drainage, to take care of all the flooding and infrastructure and everything going on down there. Drain 11 is the largest drain in the state, so it's a task.
These drains, they were constructed 100 years ago. We need to do maintenance and upgrades. I mean, if you look at it, we have done a huge amount of tiling in the last 10 years on Drain 11. I think there's been like 238 tile projects in the last 10 years into this drain. Well, we need to improve it. What happens if we don't improve a county road or a state highway? We have nothing left, So, I mean, we were just trying to do our job there, I guess.
Yeah, and what sparked this whole thing was the North Dakota DOT put 5 excess culverts in Highway 13, which affected everything downstream, which is all of us going all the way down to 5 miles from the South Dakota line. It's a century-old drain, like Luke said. Precipitation has increased over the last 100 years. The original design was designed after the flood of 1916, which is horses and manual labor, a lot of it. As you guys all know, our climate has changed. We're getting more rain. We're getting more drain tillage, which we need for controlled flow to get the drain out or the water out of here. So we had landowners come to us.
Let's see here. We were just trying to do our job. You know, they were looking for improvements. We looked at different ways of doing things. We did this the way drainage projects have always been funded for the most part across the state. We have multiple other drains that we have funded this way. Drain in my area we took to a vote and it failed, and landowners still wanted something done. So we did what we could afford to build over 5 years at a time, and after we done phase 1, all the landowners in my side of the county were wondering how fast we could start phase 2, you know, and well, now with our funding sources the way they are, we couldn't start phase 3 this year, so we are looking at a bigger project and taking it to a vote. Now all the landowners want to vote on a huge project, so.
We got 4.4 miles completed at Drain 11 anyway, out of the 11 that we wanted to get completed.
Hi there. My name's Nathan Trozen. I'm with Moore Engineering. I'm the district engineer. Just a little background on Drain 11. Like they said, the drain's over a century-year old. It is the largest drain in the state of North Dakota, coming in at over 40 miles in length. The watershed touches 3 separate counties. The watershed's over 300 square miles. The majority of the watershed is Sargent County, but there's also portions that come from Ransom and Dickey County. The one thing I wanted to point out here is that there's kind of 3 main reaches on the drain. There's a north reach and a south reach. Those 2 reaches converge at Mazzaro Slough. And then there's an outlet reach that then brings the flow and conveys it downstream to the Wild Rice River. So you'll notice when we get into the timeline of things, a lot of these discussions took place and started around 2013, 2014. So we wanted to show a couple pictures of the status of the drain at that time to add context to these discussions that were taking place. I won't spend too much time on it, but you know, for instance, the picture on the right there shows a channel where the water is exceeding its banks, leads us to believe that we have an undersized channel. Here would be the south reach. We got scour erosion on the channel bottom, leading us to believe that there's undersized culverts. And then here's a picture from just 2 years ago. So Mazzaro Slough, like I said, is where the north and south reach converge at. This has been a priority area for both the water board and the landowners. And that's primarily because County Road 3 goes through the slough. County Road 3, as shown in this picture here, is overtopped. That's actually a common occurrence. In this case, it was overtopped for over 3 months. It started after the spring event in 2022 and continued into the summer after a few rainfall events. And not only is this a major issue for due to the flooding around the adjacent agricultural properties, but it's also a major issue from a public safety concern. So you're worried about people attempting to drive over this during times of flooding, but also that what goes unnoticed is that there's a significant road detour if there's ever an emergency for emergency personnel that potentially could have used County Road 3 to get to emergency situation faster.
As we stated, the culverts were installed on the highway. We got 7 inches of rain on another drain that's not related to Drain 11, but safety is one of our bigger issues too. And there's a person that died in a drainage issue when there was 7 inches of rain. They didn't dare get out of their pickup. They went into the drain and they tried to, EMT people tried to get him out, but he was too scared. He couldn't swim. He was too scared of water. Anyway, long story short, safety is huge for us. And there's a lot of this drain 11, that's a 2-to-1 and a 1-to-1 slope.
In 14, we undertook an analysis of all 43 culvert crossings along Drain 11. We proceeded with the Upper Wild Rice River watershed study. 15 and 16, we discussed the study and project options. with landowners. Everybody wanted to approach it in phases, which I've kind of went through a little bit of that already.
And we weren't quite sure how the state would have enough funding for their cost share when we did a 40-mile drain. I mean, if you brought it to a vote for the whole 40 miles, I mean, I think it'd be looked at real scrutinally. So that's why we wanted to do it in phases, since it already worked out for his side of the county.
Yes.
Folks, I know it's, excuse me, my name's Sean Fredericks. I'm the attorney for the board. Pardon me. We've got a lot of slides here and we're not going to go through them all. I'm going to try to run through the crux of the issue here for you. And I think this slide captures a lot of it. There were a lot of lawsuits. I do have Chris McShane here. He's going to describe what happened. There are 2 Supreme Court cases. I'm going to have Chris kind of describe those, but we'll try to condense that for you. I know it's the end of the day, but this slide right here, I think, is the crux of the issue. So let me step back and talk about how, and I'll try to make this quick, but let me talk about how water resource districts fund and finance projects. First of all, I'll tell you, Dan Twitchell, the namesake of our firm, Onstead Twitchell, Dan started representing water boards, their precursors, in the 1950s. He's in the North Dakota Water Hall of Fame. He did this stuff for decades, right? And so he's the one who taught me this, and I can still remember the day he did it. It was when I first started. I went to a water board meeting. He started having me represent water boards. I went to a water board meeting. They were talking about doing a reconstruction project, and they turned to me and said, well, how do we fund this? And I didn't know. So I went back and I talked to Dan about it, and I sat across his desk and he taught me this. And so water boards financed projects the same way, literally for 70 years, as far as I know. And so the way this works is, if you're doing a new project, I don't care if it's a legal drain or a new retention dam, the Maple River Dam, they went through the same assessment process that you go through for a little 1-mile drain. So it doesn't matter if it's a retention project or a legal drain project or whatever it is, to create an assessment district, you go through the same process. Now the benefit analysis is different, right? Retention benefits, et cetera. That's all different, but the process itself is the exact same. So you set up an assessment district. So when you go through that, just to condense that a little bit, you have a project concept, you have your engineer prepare an estimate, cost estimate, you engage the public, et cetera, et cetera. You determine what the cost estimate is, and then you figure out what the benefit area is and the assessment area. So if the project is going to cost you $1 million and you have X acres, then you decide, all right, who benefits the most? They're at 100%. What's the next level? It might be some projects, it might be 75%, might be 50%, et cetera. But we go through that. And then so you have to spread that local cost across those landowners. And then if you have, and then the State Water Commission, God bless them, they provide cost share, right, for our projects. So what you do is, if you have $1 million of local costs and the State Water Commission is providing a couple $100,000, and maybe you have some cost share from the local county for road crossing improvements, you have $1 million left, you send out 1 million votes, okay? And then the votes that come back are the ones you count. So if you get 500,000 out of 1 million, then you count the 500,000. If you get 250,000 plus 1, the vote passes, okay? That's not relevant to what we're talking about here, but I just wanted to let you know that's how the assessment district process works. So back in 17, when the assessment district was created for Drain 11, they went through essentially the same process. The process has been almost the same for over 100 years. So when you create the assessment district, then you issue bonds to finance the construction. It might be, maybe it's these days, maybe it's 15, 20 bucks an acre or something over 15 or 20 years. And then when the construction bonds are paid off, then you still have your assessment district. It doesn't disappear. You still have your assessment district. And the reason you have it is because then you got to finance maintenance, repair, operation, and as the Attorney General noted in the 2020 opinion, you can finance deepening and widening of a drain. So you can do some improvements. So that's what the maintenance district, and it's called a maintenance district, is kind of a misnomer, but the maintenance district is created by virtue of the creation of the assessment district. Okay, so that's a little background on how you finance projects up front. So when you have an existing drain, you have 2 options. This is the way it's been until the recent Supreme Court case. water resource districts have had two options. And again, this is the way they've always done it. One option is, let's say you have a 10-mile drain, and the whole thing, the slopes are failing, you have erosion, the culverts are too small at the road crossings. You have a 10-mile drain, and to reconstruct the whole thing, it's going to cost you $3 million. Okay, so what you do is, what the water resource districts have always done is they've looked at, all right, how much do we bring in our levy, our annual levy? Let's say your annual levy brings in $100,000, maximum. That's your maximum. They decide that every year when you're going through the budget process. Let's say your annual levy, the max, brings in $100,000. Under the statute 6116.1-45 and its precursor that was in existence for decades, 612146, under that statute, and the threshold changed a little bit over the decades, but you could borrow ahead 6 years, okay, against that maintenance levy to finance or fund a project. So again, let's say your maximum's 100,000, and let's say you had 200,000 in your fund already from the past 3 years of levies or something. You have 200,000 over here, and you apply for cost share from the North Dakota State Water Commission, 45% for eligible items for a drain project. Let's say they give you 200,000. So you got 200,000 in the pot already. You've got 200,000 the Water Commission is willing to give you. And then what do you have left? So let's say the full project is $3 million, but there's a large box culvert or something up there and it's expensive. So what if we cut it in half? What if we do 5 miles? That's only $1 million. We got 200,000 here, 200 from the Water Commission. We have 600,000 that we can borrow ahead, okay? So what we would do is we'd approach landowners and say, we can either do the full project, the full 10-mile project for $3 million, but we're gonna have to take that to a vote, and you are gonna have to pay new assessments for that new project. Or, here's the other option. We can do a 5-mile stretch, and you just continue to pay your maintenance levy, which is capped at $4 an acre for 100%. If you're at 100%, you pay $4 an acre as the max. We can do just the 5-mile project. You just continue to pay what you're paying right now. You don't pay anything more. And we can just do a 5-mile project. And we'll issue bonds 6 years ahead. And then when that project is done and we have a 6-year bond levy, bond issue, excuse me, when those bonds are paid off, then we can do the next, maybe you can do the next 2 miles or something like that. And the North Dakota Attorney General indicated in the 2020 opinion that you can do that as long as you don't obligate the drain for more than 6 years. So back to my Dan Twitchell story, the way Dan always interpreted it is obligate means borrow. So from his perspective, you have $200,000 in the pot, and then whatever you get from the Water Commission, you don't count that as obligating your fund, your drain fund, okay? To him, and he was bond counsel, to him, obligating meant borrowing against. So the way it's always been interpreted, not just by us in my office, other water resource districts in the eastern half of the state have done this also. The State Water Commission, as a side note, has provided cost share for dozens and dozens and dozens of these types of projects, financed and funded the exact same way, again, for decades. But the way he interpreted it is obligate means borrow. So you cannot borrow more than that 6 years without going to a vote. So what does that mean? Let's say for the $3 million project for the full 10 miles, if we were gonna just try to use our maintenance levy, that would only give us $1 million. That's obligating it more than the 6 years. So you'd have to go to a vote, okay? From Dan Twitchell's perspective, if you do the 5-mile project and you're only borrowing 6 years, that's permissible because you're not obligating the levy beyond 6 years. Does that all make sense, the two options? So what happened here is exactly what the Sargent County Water Board has built several projects this way, and many, 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 many water resource districts have done the same thing. They go to landowners and they say, what do you want? Do you want us to do a vote for a new project, the full 10-mile project? It's gonna cost you $3 million. Maybe you have to pay $10 an acre over, however many years. Or do you want us to do the 5-mile project where you just continue to pay your levy? In almost every case, landowners would say, I just want to keep paying my maintenance levy, but get that drain fixed, right? That's what we hear. we need our drainage. Fix that drain, but don't tax me for it, okay? And you guys hear that too, right? And so the option that we're almost always faced with is, okay, then we'll do the 5-mile project. We'll get as much done as we can that we can afford. And then when that bond is paid off, then we'll do the next 2-3 miles, okay? That's exactly what happened on Drain 11. Funds on hand, Water Commission cost share, borrow ahead 6 years. So the argument and the debate that came up and was the source of all of these lawsuits was the funds that you have on hand, okay? And the definition of obligate. And the Attorney General opinion in 2020, the Attorney General indicated, yes, you can do projects in phases. You can even deepen and widen existing drains with those funds. And you can borrow 6 years, et cetera, but they did not, the Attorney General opinion did not opine as to what the definition of obligate was. And so that's been the source of sort of the consternation, if you will, I think, for the project opponents. And Chairman Sorvog's right. I'm not sure how to categorize it. I'll just say the project opponents. From their perspective, the drain funds on hand should also be counted against your 6-year borrowing capacity. And we disagreed because Water Resource District, there had never been a court case about that, about the interpretation of that statute. But we agreed that's how Water Resource Districts had done it for decades. So from our perspective, the funds on hand didn't count as obligating your drain fund. Okay, and so what ended up happening, and I'll let Mr. McShane talk about the cases in a few minutes, but what ended up happening is there were a few different lawsuits. The first one was filed in 2017, and the project opponents said, nope, you have to count your drain funds on hand against your 6-year borrowing capacity. And because you didn't, you should have to take this to a vote. And we disagreed. It was dismissed on jurisdictional grounds by the district court, and the Supreme Court upheld that dismissal. So from our perspective, okay, that was their shot at challenging the legality of the project. The question as to whether or not the project needed to go to a vote, the legality issue was resolved in that Supreme Court decision. Then there was another lawsuit or an appeal of a decision. They made the same arguments. That was dismissed. Later on, there was another appeal when the board awarded the construction contract. Same argument. Well, judge, they needed to take that to a vote. The judge dismissed that one. And I'll let Mr. McShane talk about the eminent domain case. But what ended up happening is the Supreme Court ruled that we could not use eminent domain for the project. The Supreme Court did not rule did not say that the project is illegal. Okay, that's not in the opinion. What they said, the holding is you cannot use eminent domain for the project because as an underlying matter, you had to count funds on hand against your 6-year borrowing capacity. And so that was in defense of the eminent domain. And so I keep saying this, but I'll let Mr. McShane talk about it. But so I just wanted you to understand that it's kind of a complex issue, right? This obligating your 6 years, but we interpreted it the same way, we being water resource districts, for over 70 years. And I think I've heard at several meetings and I've seen in several emails, I've seen suggestion that the Sargent County Water Resource District and that Fredericks, they came up with this scheme. And what I can tell you is it's not a scheme. Dan Twitchell look, I'm a German-Irish linebacker, right? I've got aggression in my blood. Dan Twitchell is a true gentleman, and this was his interpretation, and this is how water boards have been doing it for decades. This was not some scheme that we came up with to build Drain 11, okay, and to do it without a vote. And it wasn't us disregarding current or existing law that said you have to take this to a vote. From our perspective, it did not require one. And by the time the board met with some of the landowners in 2019, the Supreme Court had already ruled on the legality. And some of the folks, some of the project opponents, the vast majority of folks were telling the board, we don't want to pay new assessments. We don't need a vote. Just go out and build that thing. And at this landowner meeting in 2019, after that Supreme Court decision, some of the folks who opposed the project said, well, why can't you just stop and go to a vote? And so you probably heard that too in some of the emails. And that sounds easy, right? Yeah, just go have a vote. I'll tell you what, the voting process takes about a year, and it's an expensive process. And I think, as you all know, inflation was out of control. The construction costs were increasing exponentially every year. And so from the board's perspective, we had just been through a pretty dramatic lawsuit. The Supreme Court ruled in our favor. Inflation was out of control, and construction costs were, the wheels were turning, right? And so the notion that, well, you could have just gone to a quick vote. That's not how it works. And so right now, standing here, after 9 years of the acrimony, maybe we'd say, yeah, maybe we should have just stopped this whole thing and gone to a vote. But my gosh, we had just been through 3 years of litigation. To delay it for another year for a few opponents, the vast majority of folks were telling the board, look, just do what you can afford. Don't take it to a vote. We don't need that. We want it. Just do what you can afford, okay? So I just wanted to make sure that you understood that we were not disregarding very clear law. We weren't making things up. This is just something that water boards have done for decades. Now, the Supreme Court has now ruled, right? And they've said that, look, moving forward, you do have to count those funds on hand against your 6-year borrowing capacity. Of course, we were disappointed when we got that decision, but we respect it. And so many of the boards I work with, we've gone back to the drawing board and said, okay, after that opinion, we realized, well, we can't do projects the way we used to. Now we got to go to a vote pretty much every time. And if Drain 11 is there's going to be a next phase, it's going to have to go to a vote. We know that. We recognize that. We appreciate that. But we just wanted you to understand that we were not just disregarding very clear existing case law or anything like that. That was not the case. That statute had never been to the Supreme Court. As far as I know, it had never been litigated. And so anyway, I wanted you to understand that that is a process and a funding mechanism that boards have used for decades. And it wasn't something that we just made up in a back room. So
I want to ask Luke and Todd to come back up before we go to the next person. Because I'm still a little confused. I mean, I understand the legal interpretation of what you can and can't do. I mean, I've voted on many drains, not as big as 11. I grew up at Argosnook, but I own farmland up there. We got canals all over Kingdom Come. So I know exactly how the process works. And I voted on many, I voted against them, I voted for them. And most of the time they've passed when the majority of the landowners see the benefit to them, because that's the only reason we exist, which is part of the rationale behind yours. So it comes back, and you can talk 6 years out and borrowing ahead and all that. But I'm still, from all the experience and all of them that I have been involved with, it just baffles me that, and you say landowners supported, why you just wouldn't have gone and said, we're going to do a vote, this is what it takes, we'll get the thing done. I'm not judging you, I really not, but I'm confused why you just didn't go for that. I know the advice, you could do this, but to me it just, and I've voted on a lot of them, and they always come to votes for us. I've never heard of such a thing. The maintenance is to maintain the drains we have, and anything more, we vote for them.
Personally, in my opinion, I guess, I think taking it to a vote is an added expense that the landowners don't need. The number one key I hear from landowners all the time is, as long as we see dirt moving, we're happy. They would rather see us take that $100,000 and move X amount of more dirt than take the time and money spent on a vote. And that's where I come from on it.
And me personally, like they said, if you put it to a vote, it'd be over and above our maintenance fee, which granted our maintenance fee will go down to $4 max. But I'd rather not pay 10, 15 bucks an acre for a bond period and just keep doing this in phases also. Plus we had if you take it to a vote, we're gonna do the whole drain, the 40 miles, like I said. And I don't think the state would have cost shared 40 miles. I shouldn't say that, I don't know, but I highly doubt it. That's my opinion, not the board's.
No, just curious. And obviously the ones I voted on, there were maybe 4 or 5 miles, they've never been 40 miles. But it's always just been brought to a vote. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not judging, I'm just trying to figure out, because it obviously ended up costing a lot and getting complicated anyway than what doing a vote originally would have. Yeah, not saying the vote would have passed or not passed, that we don't know, but I'm presuming all the legal fights cost some money.
Yes.
Senator, Mr. Chairman, if I could just, real quickly, City of Fargo, for example, Drain 27, Drain 53, there have been, we partner with the City of Fargo on those drains. They're municipal drain, they're within city limits. We've done, Nate probably knows better than I do, but we've done probably 5 projects on Drain 27 and 53 that I can think of offhand in this exact manner without going to a vote. Because again, we're just, okay, we got a mile here. The city wants to put flood levees on the side slopes of Drain 53. Should we take that to a vote? They would pay their share, we'd pay the drainage share. If we're doing 1 mile of reconstruction, we didn't do votes on those because we felt like, all right, it's within our borrowing capacity, going through a
But
vote.
Sean, some of them are different too in the roads. I was a park commissioner and we were the majority landowner, so some of the reason it wasn't needed to go to a vote too is they got the agreements and stuff because one person, and there was quite a few of those drains of 27 where the park district controlled over majority.
That's absolutely right,
assessment
Senator,
costs.
yeah.
It's
Can
not
I
quite
add
apples to apples.
Can I add something else about the voting? If we go back to the map, a large portion of the drainage area is in Ransom County. We do not currently assess Ransom County. We mail their auditor an assessment and they throw it in the garbage. Well, if we took it to a vote, every resident that owns land in Ransom County is gonna get a right to vote. What are they gonna vote? They say they get no benefit. They're gonna vote no. It would have failed because of that. And that's another issue here. What do we do about Ransom County? We have emails basically threatening us if we do not pursue Ransom County paying their share, we're gonna get sued again. Well, we're not about suing friends and neighbors. I mean, Ransom County is a neighboring county. We need to work with them on a lot of other things. So, you know, that's something else we need help with and direction from people like you guys.
Well, you're making arguments for our base and concept arguments on a lot of this governance.
One more thing, Senator.
But
Cole.
I'm just trying to get a handle on this.
One more, yeah,
Involved a
I
lot.
forgot about this, and I should have, after that 2019 Supreme Court decision, so we went ahead with the project. We already had state cost share funding for the original 11 miles of the project. If we went to a vote like the opponents wanted to, we would have lost that, had to start all over with the State Water Commission again. That was another reason.
Let's continue going forward here, because there's a few here that got to drive a long ways when we get done today.
Yep, certainly.
So let's
Maybe
just keep moving forward.
Maybe I could do, Mr. Chairman, is introduce Chris McShane to talk about what the 2019 case meant and what this new Supreme Court case meant, and then everybody understands. One quick comment, Senator Chairman Sorvag, you did make the comment about the watershed piece. The bill that Senator Lueck authored last, I believe it was last session. At any rate, I think that's exactly what Senator Lueck was trying to get at, that, look, hey, if you're not getting along as neighbors, we need a mechanism, and I appreciated that. And I think, anyway, I do think that was trying to address that issue. But anyway, I could have Mr. McShane talk about the Supreme Court cases.
Thank you. My name is Chris McShane. I am litigation counsel that was involved in the eminent domain process for Drain 11. Once the design was complete and the project was moving forward. With eminent domain is a creature of statute, and it's a statutory process that needs to be strictly construed. So when we start an eminent domain process, you have to check off each and every one of those boxes. And the eminent domain process went forward both from is it necessary and proper to take the property? And then once that is answered in the affirmative, then the next question is what is the just compensation that should be paid to the landowners at that point? The eminent domain follows the 2019 case. The 2019 case was a jurisdictional procedural process. So in 2016, the Water Board passed a resolution of necessity to go forward with the process as a whole. And landowners had notice of that. The Supreme Court identified that the landowners received information at a public meeting and also at the regularly scheduled meetings for the Water Board. The several landowners in the assessment district, and we got to make sure that we remember that the assessment district is bigger than just the property that physically touches the drain itself. So not everybody in the, I think it's 170,000 acres that are in this assessment district are going to have property that is directly impacted by a taking using eminent domain. And as a result of that, the scope of people that can challenge a decision with respect to the assessment district is much larger than the scope of landowners that can challenge a project in the eminent domain process. In 2018, I believe it was, several of the landowners who are in the assessment district challenged the resolution of necessity, saying it was improper for the Sargent County Water Resource District to pass that resolution of necessity because the project is not necessary and the funding mechanism that was proposed was not proper. So again, it comes back to that funding mechanism of whether or not you can use funds on hand as a jump start, similar to cost share from the state, and then obligate 6 years of the maintenance levy beyond that. That appeal was, the challenge was not in the form of an administrative appeal. The challenge was done in the form of an injunctive action, where they started a separate lawsuit against the Sargent County Water Resource District saying, prevent this from happening, Judge. And the judge said, we have a mechanism in place to make a challenge like this, and that is an administrative appeal, and you didn't do that, and therefore I have to dismiss your action. They appealed that decision from the district court to the North Dakota Supreme Court. The North Dakota Supreme Court agreed with the district court, saying we have a statutory process to challenge a decision made by a water resource district, and you were too late to do that. And therefore, the challenge to the necessity and the challenge to the process is not appropriate. So following that 2019 case is when the project continued to go forward. The right-of-way that's necessary for the project became the issue, and we needed to then go ahead and acquire that. So with with that going forward, we negotiated with most landowners, and many of the landowners from which property rights were necessary voluntarily agreed to convey those to the Water Resource District. There were 3 landowner groups that did not agree to convey the property rights that were necessary. To allow the project to be built, an eminent domain action was started. The same challenge that was brought initially to the resolution of necessity was brought again in the eminent domain act. The district court said this is not the proper time or place to raise this challenge. You should have done that using the statutory process to appeal. And the district court judge confirmed the eminent domain, conveyed the property, and set just compensation. The Water Resource District paid the just compensation, and after the just compensation was paid, construction work began on the project as a whole. One of those 3 landowners appealed to the North Dakota Supreme Court. The other 2 did not. The one landowner that appealed to the North Dakota Supreme Court was Mr. Matthews and the estate of Nancy Matthews. And that he owned property that was actually not going to be constructed upon because the cost of the project had gotten too high to be able to pay for it using the maintenance levy. The other 2 property owners or property owner groups did not appeal. Construction happened on their property. They have accepted payment. They have actually signed easements now, and the work on their property is done.
Later. My question, though, is for Mr. Fredericks.
Oh, I'm so.
So we'll continue, I guess.
The one landowner that appealed the eminent domain action, the North Dakota Supreme Court analyzed each step of the eminent domain process, with respect to the eminent domain authority, which is 6116.1-45 sub 3, there is a requirement for the funding to be properly complied with. And that is the only reason that the North Dakota Supreme Court went into detail with respect to how funding should happen. The North Dakota Supreme Court ultimately decided that the process for funding this project was not followed in step-by-step fashion. They said that they would assume that the project as a whole would be necessary and proper, but again, it's the steps that are necessary in an eminent domain process that the Supreme Court has disagreed with, and they said that the project, the eminent domain cannot go forward unless those funding steps were properly followed. And again, that was what Mr. Fredericks talked about with respect to funds on hand being counted or not being counted. Yeah, I think it is worthy to note that the North Dakota Supreme Court said that that cost share from the state can be used as a springboard, and then that would not be counted towards what obligating the maintenance fund would be for. So again, it was a matter of, is the funds on hand in the accounts of the Water Resource District at the time the project was begun, are they the same or similar to cost share from the state, or are those funds on hand more similar to a bond, which would then have to be repaid by the maintenance levy going forward? Ultimately, the Supreme Court indicated that they are similar to and should be factored into the obligation of the maintenance levy. And as a result of that, the matter was remanded back to the district court. At that time, the landowners who did not appeal signed their easements, took their money, and do not challenge. The landowner who did appeal received or released the money back to the Water Resource District, and no construction has happened on his property. And no construction will happen on that property unless and until a new project is planned and ultimately moved forward upon. Does the committee have any questions for me about the eminent domain process?
Senator Magrum.
I'm trying to understand, was this a cleaning out and widening, or was it all new?
I think that's probably a better question for Mr. Trozen, who's the engineer of record on the project.
Yes, so this was a drain improvement project. So we deepened the drain and we widened and flattened the side slopes to improve the safety and future maintenance responsibilities of the drain. I just wanted to touch on here, I won't present all of my construction slides, but just the one I wanted to show here. This map shows the original 11-mile extents that was pursued in 2016, going through Mazzaro Slough, that priority area that I talked about in the beginning. The green there is the 4.4 miles that was ultimately constructed, because that was the only portion of the drain that was within the district's budget. And so that's about 40% of what we originally went for. And while we didn't get to do our 11 miles into Mazzaro Slough, the 4.4 mile project was a success, which is shown by that letter of support that Mr. Fredericks mentioned right away. There was over 50 landowners that signed that letter of support. These improvements that were made to the drain greatly benefited the safety of the roads next to it, including County Road 4. It flattened the side slopes and it improved the efficiency of the drain. The drain, like we said, is over a century-year-old. It was undersized for current standards. So the drain now for these 4.4 miles is designed to current standards, protecting the infrastructure and improving the drainage for the agricultural properties. Just the one picture I wanted to show here, this is the end of our construction project. You can see the difference between what was constructed on the south of the road there, and the north of the road would be not constructed. And you can see the difference in the flooding in the fields adjacent to the drain. So these improvements are primarily for agricultural benefits, but they also have significant public safety benefits as well. And I believe if you have any questions, I could definitely answer that regarding the design of the project.
So why did you guys need to use eminent domain on that project? Was that just for that 4 miles you were talking about?
Yes. Well, so the eminent domain that took place was based upon the planned 11-mile project, because when eminent domain started, that's what the expected cost would allow. The reason that eminent domain was needed is because, as Mr. Trozen said, this drain was originally constructed more than 100 years ago, It wasn't designed to today's standards. It needed to be wider based on side slopes, and there would also be access along the edges of it on a temporary basis. So much of the right-of-way that was acquired was temporary. Along the Matthews property specifically, there was going to be some straightening of the drain itself based upon where it had been traditionally and what had been changed with respect to design and efficiencies going forward. Again, that construction did not happen, but that was the intent along the Matthews property, which was the most extensive eminent domain. And again, that's the eminent domain that did not go forward.
Just to add to that, so when we did our original estimate for the 11-mile project in 2016, the estimated cost of construction at that time was about $2.5 million for the 11 miles. In 2022, we did bid that full 11 miles in hopes that we would get a favorable bid and we could do as much as we can. That bid came in over twice as much at $5 million. So it exceeded the board's borrowing capacity, and they were only allowed, or they only had the budget to do about 40% of that. And as Chris mentioned here, within the green area, 2 of the 3 eminent domain properties, that's where their properties were. And then the third one was within the yellow area, which is why we ultimately gave back the rights to the land, I guess.
Okay, we're going to keep moving here a little bit too. Senator Lewick had a question for somebody, because we've only got this room for a certain amount of time. So did you have?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question, Mr. Fredericks, was, so as my bill from the last session was to require boards from counties that have projects that go into a different county, different water area, what steps have been taken by the Sargent County Board or the Ransom County Board or the Dickey County Boards to actually fulfill that obligation?
Sure.
Anything?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Lewick, so I can tell you that the members of the board have met with the Ransom County Board. What I can also say before maybe Luke and Todd want to talk about their discussions with the Ransom County Board, one thing that we would like to see in that bill is the reassessment language added. So
I get it.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think that would be helpful because there's right now, and I can tell you what the challenges are, reassessment is not in it. So we don't have the ability to force somebody to accept them on a reassessment in that language. So yes, Senator Lewick, I think that would be great if we could have that added.
My second question for you, Sean, is that, okay, so you represent the Boise Sioux Watershed District in Minnesota.
One of my partners does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. In that watershed scenario, is that a much better functioning type of setup than what we have going on here with what is happening in Sargent and Ransom and or other counties in the state of North Dakota?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Lewick, so this question comes up quite a bit. I think there are absolutely advantages to that scenario, but I also know that having worked with some boards over there and talking to my partners and talking to other folks who work in both states, there are also definitely disadvantages. Also, okay. The political challenges can be difficult because you're dealing with multiple county commissions. Sometimes that works great, other times it doesn't, and so there are some challenges. Yeah.
We'll have to work on that.
Certainly, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think Luke and Todd just had a couple more quick things, and then I just have one closing comment.
Quick.
We'll call it a day.
Yeah, let's just take you got about 2 minutes, and then because
certainly.
I'd just like to add one thing that support the petition of support you guys got from all those farmers and landowners. You don't have to look at it. I'm just telling you that 30% of them asked me how the opponents can be tiling their ground when they cost us this much more money for fixing the drain. So a lot of that eminent domain land is tiled now as we speak. Wanted to say that. And one last thing I want to say is, I know the emails you guys have gotten that probably pictured us as bad guys, but we're not. We're proactive, good farmers, ranchers that are looking out for agriculture and the infrastructure and future generations. That's what I want to tell you.
Well, I appreciate it too, because I've worked with a lot. I farmed for many years before, and you're not doing it for the money. So I do realize that. I think everybody's intent is right, but we've had a lot of emails. So anyway, but was there any more? Because otherwise we just.
I don't think, I would just like to add, if you look at this slide here, I mean, 1% of the landowners in Drain 11 Assessment District have challenged the project. I mean, look at that number right there. I think that number speaks for itself.
Mr. Chairman, just my last thing, and we'll leave you alone. I just want to note that, again, we have a new rule from the Supreme Court. We know that moving forward, more projects are going to require votes. We're okay with that. We're going to do it. If there's going to be another phase of Drain 11, it's going to require a vote. We know that, and we respect that, and we appreciate it. The Sargent County Water Board, these guys are great guys. They've been through a lot. It's been very acrimonious with the other side. I hope that we can make amends with those folks. I really do, and I hope we can work together on the next phase. So
Okay.
thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys. Now, was there anybody else that wanted to speak that was in support of this? For the drain, I don't know how you say support, 'cause I think there's support for the drain, not in the process. So let's, we'll go for, yeah, I know. We'll go for about 7, 8 more minutes, and then there's a couple, I don't know if Bob and stuff, we're still going to speak. So I want to be done by 4:30. So if you can do it in 3, 4 minutes or something.
Or less.
That would be
Chairman
good too.
Sorbach.
Thank you.
Members of the committee, I'm Brian Schulich. Grew up Oaks, North Dakota, went to school at Oaks, North Dakota, farm in Sargent County area at the north end of the drain number 11. So very experienced with what's going on with drain number 11. Even back when the Sargent County Water Resource Board was taken to court by the federal government for putting fill in a wetland. Both myself and my father were deposed. I don't know what I would have known, but we were there. I grow potatoes, so drainage is highly important to me. I believe I've got 19 lift stations that put water in drain 11. So keeping this project viable is very important to us. Okay, specifically on one particular parcel, a half section that's had 80 acres that became so inundated it wasn't even eligible for CRP. I did an extensive tiling project on that. Now you'll see 200 bushel corn growing on that and irrigated potatoes. I could show you 6 quarters from the intake of drain 11 north. I think I've improved them probably by $500,000 each with drainage. So drainage is very important. I was one of the 5 people that approached the board and asked them to get creative and make this ditch work. So I'm brief. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Okay, continue. Or was there any questions? Go ahead.
I'm Roger Zedek. I'm one of the board members. I want to clear something up. This was all started by the North Dakota State Highway Department redoing Highway 13 in 2013. There was 3 sets of culverts underneath Highway 13 by Drain 11. A neighbor of mine was driving by one day and he called me. He said, "Say, these culverts that they got laying here, they're going to put in these concrete culverts, look a little bigger than the other ones." So would you mind checking it out? So I did. Took a tape measure out there, measured them, called the engineer, and I says, "Here's the measurements." He comes back, says, "These are 5 times larger than what's in there as far as water capacity." At that time, a good friend of mine who was also on the water board, Jim Bussey, and I looked at each other and go, "Holy mackerel, we got a safety issue down here." So we contacted the state highway department and says, "We understand why you did what you did, but do you understand the problems you've created for us? All these downstream crossings and stuff that used to be bridges and stuff that are now culverts that are too small, etc. Will you help us with that?" No, they don't do that. I found out years later, yes, they could have, but we took them at their word. This all started because of safety issues. Then it got all blown out of proportion. Safety was the reason this started, and I hope the cripes you guys take that into consideration, because if somebody dies out here again, like we lost the guy north of Gwinner in 2013, I don't want that on my shoulders. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anybody else that wanted to comment? Bob, do you want to?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to
You want to
address
pull
you.
the mic over by your mouth?
For this opportunity to address you this afternoon. My name is Bob Banderette from Cogswell, and I'm a landowner in the Drain 11 watershed. I'm also the Banderette from the North Dakota Supreme Court Banderette decision from 2019 that was mentioned earlier. There were quite a few things I could refute, I guess, or disagree with from the presentation that you just heard. Part of it is what you see up there on the board, the 1.5% of landowners and how 4% can speak for the other 96%. How do you know that we're speaking for only 4% when there's never been a landowner vote? That's the way that you would find out who's for it and who's against it, in my opinion. And I'm going to restrict my comments here to the fact that there was no vote. And that's what the opposing landowners from the very beginning said. If there was only a vote, we wouldn't be here today. Because it was painfully aware from the outset that my local water board would do anything to avoid a landowner vote on the Drain 11 improvement project. The resolution of necessity that was mentioned earlier, which is the board action from which a appeal must be taken, was not on the agenda of the meeting where it was adopted in 2016. Landowners asked the board numerous times to just have a vote, but were told a vote would take too long and cost too much. You heard that already today. And by the way, the project took 6 years with a cost of $500,000 in legal fees. In the Banderette Supreme Court decision mentioned earlier, the landowners argued the same points as the most recent Beck case, that the board had exceeded the 6-year maximum levy and that a landowner vote was necessary. The Supreme Court sided with the district court that the landowners had missed the 30-day appeal period and no other merits of the case were considered. The board, however, lost no time in telling anyone who would listen, including legislators and the State Water Commission, and again today here, that the issues were all settled. And the Supreme Court had approved the board's method of financing the project without a vote. That, of course, was untrue. Landowners continued to ask for a vote. In August of 2022, before construction on the Drain 11 improvement project had begun, the landowner's attorney sent the water board a letter stating that litigation would stop if there was a vote held. Knowing full well that litigation would continue if the board rejected this offer and that the court could possibly rule against them, the board forged ahead with construction. And as we all know, in December of last year, the Supreme Court handed down a unanimous decision in the Beck case that the board had erred by exceeding the 6-year maximum levy and that a landowner vote was indeed required. Therefore, the board had no authority to let bids for construction and no authority to issue bonds to pay for it. These are not minor infractions. Yet to this day, there have been no consequences for the board's actions. They refuse to take responsibility for their mistakes and expect landowners to continue to make payments on unauthorized bonds. And it is my understanding now that their efforts to construct the multi-million-dollar improvement projects without landowner votes continues. It has come to my attention that a commodity group will be offering legislation next year on behalf of water boards to raise the maximum maintenance levy from $4 an acre to $8 an acre and the 6-year time frame in a 6-year time frame to 10 years. If this proposal succeeds next year, the dollar amount and time frame will be so high there will never be another landowner vote again. Why should landowners be denied a vote on multi-million-dollar projects that they must pay for? Why should a 3 or 5 member board be able to make those decisions all alone? Please be aware during the next legislative session, as it seems the Supreme Court decision has settled nothing. Thank you, and I would take any questions that you might have.
Is there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak?
Chairman, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
My name is Paul Matthews. I was one of the named defendants, and the name comes up quite often to this afternoon. And that's not a comfortable thing for me to handle. I guess, like Bob, I could refute a lot of things, and you're not the body to judge here. The facts are there. The Supreme Court ruled, and I'll just point out maybe two items. The funds on hand, they were never there. And in fact, if you listen to the Supreme Court oral arguments, it came up to, well, were you guys going to have a bake sale to meet your shortage? I felt comfortable when the Supreme Court Justice realized what was going on there. The second thing I would look to is, it's been a difficult trip. I've been at the Supreme Court twice. I was sued by the water board saying I was trespassing on my own land, and that was settled. And it seemed like at the end of that, there seemed to be this opinion thrown at me is that, look, we'll see if we can make Mr. Matthews regret that he took us to the Supreme Court. That was the feeling I was having. And here, just a few years later, we're into this mess. All we wanted was a vote. All we wanted was a vote. Mr. Mander had talked about the August 22 letter that was offered to the water board. You can read the minutes. They acknowledge they got it. There's no discussion of why they discarded it. The options were there to cure this a long time ago. And what's wrong with votes? I agree with the chairman. Let's have a vote. Thousands of dollars, it's not that hard. I think this thing could have been done in a couple months. Just have a hearing and a vote. That's all. I might want to just close at this point is that another county board is facing an issue where they also have now adopted a motion to levy an unauthorized levy. They're in the process of returning that money to their patrons and the landowners, property owners. It was a mistake. But come January, I imagine I'll be writing out checks to pay for the project. The Supreme Court said this project cannot proceed. I don't know, that sounds illegal to me. So I think I'll close there. I would hope that if you guys want to hear from our attorney, he would have tried to remote in, but things were not successful. But there's a different perspective to this. I hope this never happens to anybody else. I'm tired, very tired, 8 years. Tired. I'll entertain questions, and really any question, I will do my best to answer.
Any questions for Paul? No, thank you. Is there anyone else that wanted to speak on Drain 11? Seeing none, well, we've heard a lot, what we've heard. I guess I'd wish there could be a conclusion, but the reason I wanted you to all speak, because there's obviously disagreements in this and that, and if the only way to settle it is legislation, then hopefully there can be some next session that can sort out some of these issues. So everybody at least is on a clear playing field, because obviously some feel you had the vote, some you say you don't, and I'm not picking any sides. That's not our job. Like I said, that we're not judges, but we are politicians. So I just think it needed to be put on the record, both sides. I appreciate the time at all. And I know Leon wanted to be here, and there was reasons not to, but I think we've got a good feeling, and obviously Senator Lewick will be dealing with a lot of it if there is a bill or an issue on it. But with that, I want to thank you all for coming. Appreciate it very much. Okay, committee, or the next item, this isn't Drain 11. This is anything we've talked about today. Is there any interested persons that want to speak on anything? Good. No, nobody does. I didn't give them very long, but with that, committee, is there anything the committee wants to say? This is our final meeting. This is the end. Is there any other comments or discussion points or motions that the committee want to make? Yeah, we'll get that. But anything else? We did no bills. I did promise that. I hope you've learned a little bit. There's a lot of you that weren't involved with water before. And there was I think I stated that in the beginning, that there was an effort to educate. And because we really haven't had a lot of issues. And there's been, I'm sure, I learn things each time, but there's been a real effort to bring in a lot of different aspects. And those that weren't involved with water, I hope you realize the complexity of water. It's more than just a dike here or a water pipe here. From aquatic, it's everything. It's all over the state and all over the communities. And it's never going to end. We've been lucky to have the resource. So I hope that you did learn something, and because it was a purposeful attempt just to do that. So with that, if anybody doesn't have anything else, I need a motion that the chairman and the legislative council staff prepare and present a report to the legislative management.
So moved.
Is there a second? Somebody's got to say it. Okay, it's been moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I also need a motion that the committee be adjourned, sine die. Been moved. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Have a safe trip home. We'll see you guys later.